Life before likes. What teens actually did in the dark ages before social media. You could do something stupid at 15 and only the 3 people there remembered it, not the entire internet forever. My childhood and high school friends talk all the time about how lucky we are for this. Facebook came into our existence our sophomore year of college, but the document everything era of smartphones and Insta and TikTok didn't come to be until we were out of our wildest years, and thank God. There really was a sweet spot for a couple of years where everyone had flip phones that could only text and make calls with batteries that lasted for days. If you wanted pictures, you had to bring a camera. That made life so much easier. Facebook was still fun and innocent, and you could get in touch with people you lost contact with. Then, all of a sudden, phones had cameras and the internet, social media exploded as a result, Facebook turned to crap, and it was all downhill from there. We had parties in the woods that were mostly sitting around on blankets and talking, definitely a lot more face-to-face interaction. I'd talk to my best friends on the landline after school. We didn't text to confirm plans, so most plans just didn't fall through. We had an almost perpetual camping trip one summer. We had acquired enough plywood and 2x4 lumber to build a platform 15 feet up between several trees. It would easily sleep 10 guys. We started camping out there a lot. Every kid in the neighborhood knew about it, and it constantly evolved as people left hammocks and a fire pit and swings. There was an obligatory bag of scavenged Playboys. We'd camp at night, go home the next day to eat, go back that night. People came and went from the group of campers, but I'm pretty sure every night for a couple of months, there were between 3 and 20 guys camping out there. And of course, it all ended when one mom decided it was too dangerous being that high, and the county came and tore it all down. We memorized most people's phone numbers since we didn't have cell phones either. If I was going to call my girlfriend, I'd call her house number and have to talk to her mum or dad before they put her on the phone. Her parents would complain if she was on the phone for too long too. God, that was always so nerve-wracking. It would sometimes take me like 10 minutes to work up the nerve to call. Felt like I was saying, "Hi, I'm trying to defile your daughter. Can you put her on, please?" "Hey Mom, I'm going out to ride my bike." That meant I was riding around the neighborhood to see what other kids were up to. Maybe I'd engage on an ongoing game of kick the can, or I'd join Steve who was already shooting hoops in his driveway. I sometimes wonder how me and my mates met up without mobile phones. We just kinda knew where everyone would be. Yeah, that's because none of us had anything to do at home and we knew our friends' habits. Fairly good bet that if you went past the regular hangout spots, somebody else would be bored too. The anticipation of not knowing how your photos would turn out when using a single-use disposable camera, and then bringing the developed packet of photos to school to look through them with your friends. It was so much fun! It was more personal too. No photos of food, no lifestyle presentation, just friends and sights. Nobody worrying about whether they looked cute or not. People having fun and capturing the moment, not the image. Photographs, not photo shoots. You remember when we actually talked in person all the time? Yeah, and if we wanted to socialize with someone in a different physical location, we'd pick up the phone and call their house and hope they were around to pick up. And without smartphones and social media, there were even times when, get this, you'll think I'm crazy, we were bored. No, seriously, boredom. It was a thing before the era of constant 24/7 stimulation. I miss being bored. Like, let's make a game of not letting this balloon hit the ground bored. Or, let's see how long I can balance this pencil on my finger bored. Not the kind of bored I get now where I have a bunch of stuff I should be doing, but I just don't want to, so I sit and mindlessly scroll social media. Just drove around the town on a bicycle randomly visiting friends without prior confirmation. The world felt very small. Everyone knew everyone because there were no background noises. "Hi, Mrs. Smith, is Dave in?" No, he's gone out with Dean and Mike. I think they went to the park on their bikes." And so begins an epic adventure where you cycle to the park, meet Martin and Mike there. They haven't seen Dave, but they're going over to see Alan's motorbike that he made from parts, and he's going to jump it over the brook. So you go with them. Everyone takes a turn riding Alan's motorbike around the waste ground doing jumps over stuff. A weird man chases us and we throw rocks at him. Go back to Alan's where your bike is, and Alan's mum says you can stay for food. So you ring your house and leave a message on the answering machine telling whoever gets it that you won't be back until it's dark. Unfortunately, your brother listens to the message and doesn't tell your mother until she's shouting your name out the back door. When you eventually turn up, you're in minor trouble. There's a note stuck in your door from Dave. He called around with Dean and Mike. They're going to the park, it says. That was a normal day for me aged about 12. I read a lot more, like all the time. I realize in hindsight I used books in the 90s and noughties the way we use our phone to doom scroll and numb ourselves, except the former made me smarter instead of dumber. We used to pass handwritten notes, memorize a phone number, and hope a parent didn't answer, just show up to a house that had a pile of bikes in the front yard, and the amount of miles I traveled away from my house with a bike was insane. My parents didn't mind as long as I was back by dark. You know, I thought I went miles away from my house as a kid. Only recently, after looking up my old house, did I realize that all of my friends lived within 10 blocks of me, give or take. We put a lot of miles on riding around, but we never actually went that far. It was all a lot more social. If you wanted to meet someone, you had to leave the house. Pubs, bars, and clubs were packed out at weekends. No mobile phones, so you had to remember numbers. Or, if you forgot it, you had to go to the exact same club the following week and hope they turned up. Do stupid crap and deny it was you, because no camera phones, no proof. Sliding into someone's DMs required knowing the locker and writing a note. No social media, no phones, so no camera phones. It was great. I did plenty of dumb crap, and there's no real record of that will forever be available out there on the internet. And if you did have a camera, it was probably one of those cheap, disposable ones where everyone's eyes were red from the flash, and the pictures would usually come out a bit blurry at the best. I miss it so frickin' much. I don't even want to go back and be a teenager again. I really just want social media gone. I miss genuine interactions where you didn't already have pre-made assumptions about people. Simple and more stimulating. You had actual alone time. If you've got your phone now, you have everyone there next to you and you can check on everything at any time, and they could effortlessly check on you, so you're not really alone. But back then, if you weren't calling someone on the landline, and if they weren't calling you, then you're just not talking to anyone. You have total privacy and control, but you had more incentive to hang out with your friends and have real talk, and make memories, because sometimes it's that or just be bored. And when you got bored, there was no phone to grab so that you can still be bored but mindlessly taking in color and noise. You actually had to get up and take care of the boredom with something real. Your computer was basically just for email, so not much entertainment there. But you could play a super hard single-player game that's not online or live service, just you and the game. Or a book, and it's just you and the book and no constant dings and buzzes from your time vampire rectangle from the future. You had the opportunity to have actual you time, where nothing but what you were doing mattered, and no one knew about it unless you told them on the phone, in person, or email. To recreate that experience now, you'd have to live in a cabin in the woods with a landline, a newspaper if you care about that, and your game console, some books, and other hobby stuff. Scrolling reels isn't a hobby, it's just laughing gas to keep you sedated so you don't feel motivated to take action. Without social media, you could focus more on you and the life you have. Each day was a little different, and only you and your close friends were facing down the future. The world was full of wonder, not content. You actually had to approach a girl you might be interested in, and if you were smooth enough to score her phone number, you had the utter dread of her dad answering the phone when you finally mustered the cojones to call her. It was messy and real, friendships happened face to face, mistakes didn't follow you online, and boredom somehow made life magical. It's been a repeated sentiment that I've seen lately that people miss being bored. Maybe there's some truth to that. I still don't know that we're capable of valuing it when it happens to us. That's the point where most of us stop saying it and flip out our phones again. People answered the phone and door happily. People met up daily. People left the house and did things. People learned how to act around other people. People learned how to respectfully debate with each other. We used to go to our friends' houses, knock on the door and ask his parents, "Is X coming outside to play?" Word of mouth is powerful. I have no idea how the rumors of Marilyn Manson removing his ribs to be able to give himself a down-under kiss spread all over the world. You'd tell your parents, "I'm going outside," and then just disappear for hours. Basically, the entire thing was just kind of like Dazed and Confused for me. Amazing. I felt free. I could just go outside and play, and have a video game console meant actually enjoying it. I think they mean video game. Boring but pleasant. Walking a mile to the local video store just to dig through dozens of shelves just to find something that maybe seemed interesting, it's definitely more enjoyable than doom scrolling. I was a teenager before cell phones existed. Life was more focused and eye to eye. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Pure bliss. You could go out, have fun, make memories, and come back home, all without taking a single picture, selfie, or viral video. Making memories was cheaper overall, and digital had just started. You'd partake in actual physical activities and dream about a reality you saw on TV, where everyone's connected to everyone they wanted to be. Man, we were hopeful of what that would be. No constant notifications, no distractions from anything other than being there in the moment, soaking in all that is real. I can only imagine the peer pressure and constant need for validations from strangers on social media and everything else that teens have to go through. I sympathize with their experiences and no concerns overall, since every generation thinks the one before them were all naive and the one after them are dumb. You actually got to live and find out who you were without pressures of millions of people having the ability or desire to judge you for your actions and your mistakes. I was so lucky to be an 80s and 90s kid. Such wonderful decades. Everything felt more deliberate and meaningful. You want music? You'll need to head to the mall and sample CDs with those greasy padded headphones. Then you'd pay $20 for a CD with 12 whole songs. You had to really love that band. If you wanted movies, ask Mum to drive you to Blockbuster on a Friday night. You'd run to the back new release wall hoping that there was a VHS tape available of whatever the newest hot movie was. Want to go online? You'll need to sit down at the computer, slowly dial up via 56K, and then be patient as the website loads. You want to game with the boys? Well, they'll need to come over to your house for split-screen multiplayer with 4 controllers. Want to go to the park? You'd better be home by the time the streetlights come on or your parents will come out looking for you. You were truly off the grid with no cell phone. Nobody knew where you were. This was all normal. Sure, some of this is just my nostalgia, but I really miss it. Having high-speed internet access in your pocket has actually made everything worse. It was free. Free to be who you want, where you wanted to be. I had more freedom in primary or grade school than teenagers these days. Has the world changed? Absolutely. I'm not suggesting that this world should or could ever be able to raise kids the way that I was raised. The world's just different. But I think I wouldn't trade how I grew up for all the modern advancements of today.
Life was better before social media and cell phones. It just was. People communicated with each other more. Hunched over, staring at a screen, doom-scrolling brain rot is no way to live.
You could actually be embarrassing or awkward without it being recorded forever. Most of your life just existed in the moment, and when the day ended at school, the drama usually ended too. Life felt a lot less anxious, because you didn't see hurtful things like pictures of parties you weren't invited to, or pictures of your ex out with a new person, and you didn't have to explain yourself because a jealous boyfriend saw a picture of you at a party within 10 meters of another good-looking person. You also didn't feel FOMO because you didn't see how fun the party looked if you chose not to go. You don't see how great your ex-friend looks now or that she's having a great life. You also don't know the terrible political opinions and moral bankruptcy that some of your friends and family have. I've got to say, that ignorance was bliss. It was great. No one told us what to think and who to not like. You really didn't have to worry about the misinformation constantly thrown at us. If we didn't like something, we changed the channel or the station. We also did a great job of minding our own business. We learned how to use critical thinking and problem solving. I was able to do some pretty stupid things with no lifelong consequences or regret, because nobody was recording and posting my tomfoolery online.
We were great. My kids would never believe the crap that went on. All they see is a grumpy old guy that tells everyone to get off the lawn.
Well, let me tell you, there were a lot more magazines. The teen and the dirty sort.
And weirdly enough, you always found them in the forest, too.
A friend of mine's parents had an old short bus full of dirty mags. We used to go on the bus, grab a couple, and then return them later like the original free library. It was awesome. Looking back this second, I'm not sure why his parents had that many dirty mags. It felt real. If I said at 10 a.m. that I was going out with my friends, I wasn't contacted or expected to be home until 6 p.m. when dinner was ready. If you wanted to actually find out the truth about something, you had to read a book or magazine about the subject. It was glorious. Life was richer and fuller and more meaningful.
It was like owning a subscription to a Nintendo Power magazine and knowing the day of the week that new G.I. Joe figures would be delivered to Woolworth's department store.
Dude, I burned up the telephone wires in the early 80s calling area toy and department stores asking if they had the newer G.I. Joe stuff. Then, in the mid-late 80s, I burned them up again calling the Nintendo hotline asking how to solve intractable puzzles in Zelda. I couldn't for the life of me find the entrance to like the 5th dungeon of the 2nd quest on Zelda. All of those buttholes would tell me, if you have the power bracelet, then you have the power to find it. Get effed. I just want to chime in because there's a lot of positives in this thread. Because also back then it was a lot harder to find your people. If the kids in your class didn't watch anime, then you had nobody to talk to anime about. Additionally, you couldn't just Google random stuff to be in the know. There was no Instagram feed to alert you to stuff either. Gossip and information spread from person to person, so it was a lot easier to be isolated. Valid point. It could be very lonely as a kid growing up in the 90s or noughties. And while one might argue that the ability to Google things is infringing on our ability to recall information ourselves, sometimes you do just need to be able to do it without halting all work for an extended period of time like you had to back then. Trouble at school mostly stayed at school. You had different friend groups in different places, like school, church, sports, community art class, whatever. When you went to the bathroom, you might read a magazine or something, but maybe not because it was gross. Waiting in line meant standing silently or making small talk. You made plans and either showed up or flaked out. You didn't know anyone's opinions or hobbies without having a conversation with them, unless they were super obvious or their reputation preceded them. The internet was kind of for nerds or for specific things you were trying to learn about, like cheat codes for games, besides maybe some kind of instant messaging. News was on TV or in a paper. Music was on the radio, on a couple of TV channels or something you bought. Most of your comparison to others was local if you did that at all. You were almost never promoting yourself unless you had a business or a band or something. You were less connected and engaged, but often you were better off for it. If you wanted to play with friends, you had to actually go outside and find them. I still remember the landline numbers of my best friends' houses. The MTV was new. We listened to lots of good music, we bought CDs and played our parents' vinyls. At summer, we were out most of the time. We used to cycle everywhere. Nobody had helmets. Summer jobs started at 7 and it was a 10-kilometer bike ride away, but it was like no big deal. Life and food was much healthier, but we started drinking beer and smoking very young. Ooh. When we were younger, just kids, summers felt endlessly long. We'd just spend the days in nearby forests playing war and wandering around getting lost and then finding ourselves in a familiar place we didn't expect to at all. We went swimming to a nearby lake without any parents to watch over us. Full days spent skateboarding at a mini-ramp at the nearby church. During winter, we spent almost every evening skiing at a nearby skiing center that you could just walk to. We even had your skis and gear kept there. The 80s into 90s was a pretty glorious time to be young in Finland. Look, it's not about social media, it's about how different life was before the internet. No fear-mongering, we could go out and do anything we wanted without any parental oversight. I did everything as a younger fella. I started drinking and smoking green herbs scandalously young. Visited New York City by myself. I broke every law. I had a great time.
No fear-mongering? Do you not remember the satanic panic craze or the AIDS crisis? Or how the adults would tell us the world was always on the brink of World War III nuclear holocaust?
Right, but I didn't live immersed in that. It was on the news, and then the news went off, and we went about our business. We watched Cheers and went to bed.
Your bullies had to do that crap in person.
We still dealt with some of the concerns kids today deal with, but we dealt with them differently. I wasn't pressured to look a certain way by people online, but still felt the pressure to look a certain way based on the cool girls I saw around me. People didn't constantly photo and record themselves, so some of the cringy and questionable things I did as a teenager aren't stored to follow me around forevermore. We were outside. It was lovely. If an accident happened in public, people ran in to help. They didn't stand back and record it with commentary. I feel like it was much less hate-filled. We were ignorant to much of what was going on around us. Oh, and it definitely seemed like most people valued science.
There was a whole war happening in Europe, hundreds of thousands dead, millions more displaced, atrocities and counter-atrocities happening all the time. We'd get like 5 to 10 minutes a day about it on the nightly news, and that was really all the space it occupied in our brains. Also, homophobia was massive then. So many kids were in the closet and terrified that anyone would learn their secret. You even had straight kids getting beaten up because they weren't straight enough. Believe me, the hate was still there, it was just directed differently. When I needed my mum to come pick me up at the pool after a day of swimming, and I spent the dime I was saving for the payphone on candy, I'd do a collect call to the house, and when it asked who was calling, I'd yell out real quick, "Mum, I'm ready to be picked up from swing." A few seconds later, I'd get the message that the call was not accepted, knowing that the message was indeed received. The biggest red flags that scream uneducated. Brutally honest edition. Being wrong? Being offered proof from a reliable source, then making up an excuse and continuing to willingly be wrong. I've seen a lot of conversations that went something like that. You're wrong. Oh yeah? What's your proof? Here's a document with actual proof. Well, I'm not reading that. A lack of curiosity. People in general would be a lot more educated if they just looked things up when they came across words or concepts they didn't understand. If I'm reading or watching something and think, what does that mean? I pull out my phone and give it a quick search. It doesn't make me an expert on anything, but it does widen my knowledge base just a tiny little bit and make me a more well-rounded person. Over time, all of those teensy bits add up. Confidently speaking on a subject you know 1% of. I've been in aviation for over 15 years, and I cringe and get annoyed when family or those outside of the industry just state strong opinions without knowing the whole picture or even a sliver. I'm in agriculture and it's obvious who's uneducated when they talk about farming like, it's just riding tractors and tossing hay. I can spot a non-farmer instantly by the way they talk about certain things but have no idea what they're actually saying. They have no clue how complex and demanding it actually is. A lack of cognitive flexibility or ability to understand different perspectives. If you've never used the phrase, "I think I was wrong about blank," then you're probably uneducated. I've heard it phrased as, the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. Being stubborn enough to not change your opinion about something when being shown evidence to the contrary, or just being close-minded in general. Screaming incoherently when you're losing an argument. I love it when the repeat button gets hit. They just keep spamming whatever over and over. I don't care, bro. I don't care, bro. I don't care, bro. Pretending to be knowledgeable about everything. Reasonable people will just be able to say, you've lost me, or I don't know. Yep, I can think of plenty of times where some of the smartest people I know in my life have said I don't know. I think a lot of PhD examinations make a point of asking their candidates an impossible or barely related question to ascertain whether a candidate is capable of admitting something is outside their base of knowledge. Expressing a personal opinion as something objective, or their feeling as a fact, it's becoming worse. I've often seen them cite facts to suit their personal agenda and then say, facts don't care about your feelings. But when it's debunked, double down on what they believe to be real. I think there needs to be an addendum to that adage. My feelings don't care about your facts. That time an in-law said, they have seafood in Spain? Oh boy, so what kind of food did you eat in Spain? Bet you ate a lot of Mexican food, huh? That was my coworker upon my return from a vacation in Spain. I always suspected he was a few tacos short of a combination platter, but that basically confirmed it. I live in Ireland and had an American family member staying with me. One evening she was on the phone back to her friend in the USA and mentioned we were eating pizza. Her friend couldn't believe we had pizza in Ireland. Littering. I would posit there is a correlation between whether they litter and whether their IQ is above a certain threshold. Throwing stuff without quantifying the time, effort, and cost for someone or something else to pick it up and clean it from a beautiful environment is, crudely speaking, dumb. It stays there, becomes an eyesore, and rots its surroundings while people pass by and unconsciously ingrain that it's okay to litter. It's like a disease that spreads, and it's the environment, our nurturer and provider, that ultimately pays the price. Recreational fisherman here. I'm part of a group that voluntarily does cleanup at various launches and popular fishing locations in our Canadian forests. Nothing worse than fishing on a pristine lake and seeing the sunken beer cans from the "Hey, y'all watch this" crowd. Strong second on this one. Bragging about not reading books. Someone once told me, I don't read. If it's a good book, they'll make it into a movie. Distinctly unattractive. My cousin's idiot boyfriend proudly said this to me last week.
I don't read because my brain processes it all too fast and I get bored. I skim books every now and then, though. Quickly reverting to whataboutisms as soon as somebody challenges your argument. Putting an apostrophe in every plural. Playing videos or music in public without headphones.
Uneducated or entitled?
Oh, those two usually overlap. As a teacher, this is probably the most unexpected thing I teach to my students every motherfrickin' day, multiple times a day, and it drives me frickin' crazy. Headphones or volume off. In addition to teaching math, I repeat this phrase all damn day long. I'm so tired. Flat earthers. No further explanation needed. Shouting and trying to achieve things by being aggressive and rude. I feel like a lot of these comments are based on values we attach to being smart, I guess. Being educated doesn't inherently gift you with humility. Being unable to admit that you're wrong could just mean that you're a butthole, not that you're uneducated. Educated people make mistakes. Admitting it just means you don't have a raging ego problem. Uttering, my truth. I keep seeing this talked about. Can you explain to a lost French person what my truth means? Like, how is it used? It sounds like the kind of term that would be used by people who are really into horoscopes. Maybe I'm getting the wrong impression, though. It's just a way of saying, here are things I think are true, and I'm not interested in any contrary position. For example, it's my truth that the earth is flat. I'm not saying you have to agree or that I insist you believe as I do, but I do insist you tolerate my position. I insist you not to object or, God forbid, argue that I'm incorrect. My truth is mine, and you don't have a right to do anything but agree or be silent, or else you're being rude. Tattoos with incorrect spelling, preferably on the face. No regrets. It depends on what you mean by educated. There are people with degrees who still lack critical thinking. Not being able to hold two opposing opinions in one head is, for me, a hallmark of a limited intellect. Using an apostrophe before an S to show plural. For example, I have 2 dog apostrophe S. There's a difference between plural and possessive.
You can blow their minds with plural possessives too.
Throwing cigarette butts out of a car window or smoking while pumping gas. No critical thinking skills or ability to research properly. Loud equals funny, or worse, loud equals correct. Littering. Disrespecting expertise. Disagreement is one thing, but it's entirely different to believe that every scientist is wrong about climate change. We can challenge experts, but outright dismissing them without even cursory knowledge is a sign that your critical thinking might need a jumpstart. Being racist.
Driving around in a truck with a bunch of flags flapping.
I was driving to work one time and coming the other direction was a big full-size pickup truck with a flagpole in the back sticking over the cab of the truck. I was already rolling my eyes and then I saw the flag. It was the full Progress Pride flag. I almost had to pull over and recover from the shock. I feel like I would have gotten whiplash from that double take. Not changing one's opinion when presented with facts and new information. A lack of critical thinking and being easily frightened by news and political speak. But a better idea for stupidity would be a lack of self-awareness, because a self-aware person would at least question themselves and others, as well as understand their flaws and weaknesses. Willful ignorance. Talking louder in an argument. Getting homophones wrong. There, and there. The number 2 as in as well, and to, affect or effect. But the grand prize goes to mixing up allowed as in allowing someone, and aloud as in speaking aloud really bothers me. In their defense, I can't get my brain to understand affect versus effect unless I stop to think for a moment. Do you believe in lead poisoning? A dumb coworker of mine asked me that, for real. Hold the phone. I want to know the line of events and thought processes that led to the person asking this question. Were they lead poisoned and had been told as such but didn't want to believe it? Had that happened to someone they know? Was this completely out of the blue and they just thought that metals were solids and you can't eat or drink those? I really want to know what was going on in their head. Sharing something or echoing something you heard one time without at least attempting to either do a bit of research or at the very least quickly Googling it to see if there's any possible truth to it. Do your own research is admittedly a bit of a slippery slope that's been weaponized by hardcore conspiracy theorists to disregard proven facts and instead just trust vague and unverified sources, but in itself, I think the ability to read up on something to see if it's accurate or not is more important now than ever. You should watch the episode of Surrounded by Jubilee, where it's Dr. Mike versus anti-vaxxers. He asks one of the women if anything he says will change her mind, and she looks him dead in the eyes, smirks, and then replies, "No, because I actually read and do my own research." She told a frickin' medical doctor that and thought it was a slam dunk, as if doctors don't go through like a decade of studying medicine and reading research papers. Sometimes, doing your own research doesn't actually mean doing research. It means only searching for vague information that validates your ideals. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius?
People who still insist vaccines cause autism because somehow autism is worse than literal death to them.
I sold life insurance. Oftentimes people would buy critical illness or accident or disability insurance for their kids instead of life insurance because they couldn't fathom the idea of their child dying, but having to care for a disabled child or a sick one scared them. I also was a certified child car seat installer, and when talking to people about putting their kids in the right car seat and keeping them there longer, we were taught to talk about severe disability and disfigurement rather than death because the parents would just tune out death. If you're talking to people about the MMR vaccine, then personal stories about people with lifelong disabilities might be more effective than death. Probably still won't be effective at all, but I always try. After vaccination became the norm, deaths from infectious disease dropped far more than diagnosed cases of autism rose. Even if vaccines caused autism, which they don't, the rise in autism diagnosis mostly comes from better diagnostics, there is stark improvement over kids being killed by pertussis. The belief that alternate facts are a thing. Oh my god. Certain spelling or phrases like costed or I seen or could of, also raising their voice in an argument to just talk over everyone.
Add casted to that. He was casted in the next Marvel movie.
Failing in a logical argument, so resorting to emotions. Someone voting against their own best interests because their entire political worldview comes from quick sound bites and they don't do their own research.
People don't even know what research is. If you can Google the answer, it's not research.
Getting rid of PBS. Lack of or inability to empathize. Anti-vax. When their so-called research material is a bunch of unproven conspiracy theory nonsense. Someone exercising critical thinking and looking at the available information on a topic is never a bad thing. Facts should always stand up to being checked.
My common sense.
This is just a euphemism for not wanting to critically assess the issue at hand and consider expert guidance on how to proceed. Misusing uncommon words because they think it makes them sound smarter, when in fact it has the opposite effect. A few years ago, during a televised interview, a family member of an accused murderer attempted to refute the allegations. Rather than saying, "It's a myth," he deliberately chose the phrase, "It's a legend," seemingly in an effort to sound more intellectual. If someone thinks differently from them or holds to a different belief, then that person is 100% and unequivocally wrong all the time. My unemployed 35-year-old dropout cousin, 3 kids in a trailer Florida dweller, constantly posts memes about how he's street smart and doesn't need a degree. He thinks anyone with a higher education and career is brainwashed. He's constantly calling my mum and aunt for money for his kids. A MAGA hat. Not understanding the difference in meaning between loose and lose, losing and loosing.
How the frick did people start confusing losing and loosing? When do you even loose in continuous tense?
Racism. Hyper-religious and most evangelicals. People who jump on the hate whatever or whoever bandwagon because it's the flavor of the day. Automatically yelling and just repeating yourself when someone disagrees with you. I've noticed that racists are consistently some of the dumbest frickin' people on planet Earth, so that's my vote. The refusal to consider how the world varies from personal, anecdotal observations. This one goes for people on the left and right, agreeing with everything a celebrity or influencer or politician says. Another good one is not liking someone or their opinion because they said one thing you don't like while you agree with most of the other stuff. Poor grammar. Unable to accept somebody else's view or provide evidence to yours. People that still use the N-word. Being fooled by rage bait or propaganda. I mean, you say that, but you're not immune to propaganda. Assuming that people who fall for propaganda are less intelligent because it's so obvious to you is dangerous. You should always question your own beliefs. A lot of these answers are describing stupidity and entitlement more than a lack of education. Being married to someone from a third world country, I've met many of her relatives who've never been to school. A good example is when one of them asked me, a Jewish person, if I still visit my family back in Israel. I'm not from Israel, I've got no family there, and I've never even visited it. She assumed anyone who was Jewish came from there. Another example is watching them watch children's shows with my kids. They actually watch the shows to learn, like basic shapes, colors and things in English. They have very little understanding of the world. No idea how many continents there are, they don't understand simple finance like assets versus liabilities. And it's very apparent that they aren't stupid, they were just never taught these things. This is an incredibly important point. Just because people don't have access to schooling, that doesn't mean they can't be quick-witted, willing to learn, or open-minded, or emotionally intelligent. But unfortunately, there wouldn't be enough comments here to finish the video if we only picked the ones purely regarding a lack of education. So they're mixed in with the ones about general stupidity as well. Because boy oh boy can some people finish an education and still turn out dumb. Cruelty. Voting for that frickin' guy. Seriously, people who voted for him in 2024 after watching what he did for the last 9 or more years, what the frick? I've done my own research. No, you haven't. Confidently asserting things as facts of reality and then failing to elaborate or explain. People who play videos out loud in public restrooms? Lots of flags or stickers on your car or more likely truck. Nothing, because educated people can be morons and non-educated people can be smart and wise. Not understanding subject-to-verb agreement and or verb tenses. Racism. Not reading books or saying that you don't like to read. I feel like people who say they don't like to read just get the totally wrong impression of reading from the public education system. Thinking that science denial or straight-up contrarianism is a sign of a free mind or critical thinking. Frick, insert name here, stickers on vehicles, and usually the subject of the curse is politicians. Never asking questions and having no curiosity, always having to win an argument instead of looking at conversations as an opportunity to learn. Well, since you asked, all of Trump's buddies, it's a fact that he even says he likes the uneducated. Making politics your entire personality. Hell, making almost anything your entire personality. Telling people bleach will cure COVID or promoting crackpot ideas to cure measles. He's going to loose the game. There are some words people just need to learn to spell. Vocabulary. Declaring an inconvenience as illegal. Refusing or refuting science as opinion, especially by saying, oh, it's just a theory. Driving like a psychopath. Talk without listening. Threatening physical violence or turning to insults when they lack the knowledge to defend their position. Making a political or intellectual statement and then refusing to cite sources or rely on others to back you up. I don't know about that one. I was raised in South Mississippi and Louisiana. I'm highly educated and even have an English degree, master's and graduated with honors, but I kept my accent and a lot of the regional dialect because it's just part of me. I know it's wrong, but I do it anyway because it's really organic for me. I don't say I seen, but I say a lot of things that are very grammatically incorrect. To be fair, many do assume I'm uneducated based on the drawl alone. When I was in college, I worked in a restaurant in New Orleans for years. We got a lot of tourists, and the combo of the drawl and being a server, many people treated me like I didn't speak English or something. They thought I was a complete idiot. Pronouncing the word nuclear as nuclear. Oh boy, that's like fingernails on a chalkboard. Cybertruck. People who walk around with their pants hanging below their asses with their underwear out. driving a pickup truck with a lift kit, flying flags from every window, and political bumper stickers on every available surface. People who think Reddit represents the real world. Not understanding the difference between scientific research and doing your own research, aka watching YouTube videos and TikToks and reading posts on Twitter. Thinking watching a 5-minute YouTube video makes you more of an expert than actual experts. People who are always talking, they never stop to think. Flat Earth theorist people. Thinking that everything is a conspiracy because your fragile ego won't let you admit you don't understand anything in the real world. When someone yells, "Roll Tide!" The American president in 2025. Bringing politics into normal discussions. Anti-vaxxers. Worshipping the orange Cheeto. Displaying a Confederate flag. Getting mad when corrected instead of being open to learning. To be honest, any kind of bigotry, it's usually brought on by a lack of information and unwillingness to learn. Speaks in absolutes, inflexible in their beliefs, especially when faced with conflicting facts. The ticking time bomb that nobody wants to talk about. Could this blow up in our lifetime? How about the high cost of housing and mortgage interest rates? I can't even imagine being a young person today and trying to afford a $750,000 house. I just talked to my wife about this yesterday. We built our home in 2011 for $200,000. A month or so ago, our neighbors, who built in 2015, slightly smaller home, 2,300 square feet compared to 2,500 of ours, sold their home for $500,000. The buyers massively overpaid, of course, as houses now are going for around $430,000 to $450,000, but still. Double the value in just over 10 years? No way that's real. We couldn't afford to live here if we didn't already. Combine that to our 15-year refinance in 2020 at 1.99% interest rate, and we are never moving anytime soon, not until this house is paid off at least. I feel terrible for families just starting off. Everything is so inflated. The subscription everything model becoming completely unsustainable for the average person. Software, entertainment, heated seats in a car, grocery delivery. Eventually, people's incomes just won't be able to handle 1,000 tiny monthly payments. Something's got to give. I mean, fingers crossed for this one. Just let people own stuff again. My fiancé and I are in our 30s and kept binders of DVDs and seasons of shows. They're nice to have since our Wi-Fi has been going out more and more often due to crazy weather and crap. Pension crisis. The number of people saving to retire at all is scarily low. Yep, this is a big one. I try to save as much as I can, even with a good job, but I worry about this. It's sad to look at your old age and think you can either work yourself until you can't and then basically rot away, or just, solve it yourself. Came here to say this. Social safety nets are being eroded and the cost of living is skyrocketing at the same time as more and more people are living paycheck to paycheck with no retirement savings. Plus, automation and AI will continue to erode the job market over the next couple of decades. Even if you think AI is overblown right now, which it is, in 20 years it's going to be a lot better. Throw in increasing competition from globalization and a lot of people will be forced into retirement even before they're ready. The education crisis. From the stories I've heard, students are expressing a lack of basic skills and common sense, which will definitely come back to bite them when they're adults. Current students will be very underprepared for life after school, and you just have to listen to teachers' stories for the world of hurt coming in 10 years. I'm still cautiously optimistic about our future generation, in some parts of the world at least. Where I live, there's actually a bit of a revolution against screens in class, so we'll see where that goes. But also, the Zoomers I know all seem pretty smart, driven, and hardworking. I'd be more worried about them becoming burned out and disillusioned than anything else. The fight for fresh water. Yes, this will eventually be a crisis. Not a conspiracy theory. I think a lot of powerful folks know this and they're maneuvering to control it. Subprime car market. The volume of debt in car finance is huge and depressed resale value of cars coming off of lease is far below what was expected. The Porsche Taycan is a perfect example of this, and now Porsche has a chunky black hole in its books because it can't get book value for these cars. In fact, the car market period, people are now taking out 7-year loans on cars. It's ridiculous. The whole mass surveillance and legal ID for everything bullcrap that's currently going on everywhere. protecting the children, yeah right. And megacorporations like Meta and Google collecting every bit of data they can. People will either massively push back or privacy will completely die. I'm afraid that a debt bubble is brewing. Auto foreclosures are climbing. Same with homes. Quite rapidly too. July 2025 saw a 13% increase from the year before in home foreclosures. This is an already prohibitive market to enter. I think it's crazy, but I'm not an expert. Time for the fourth once-in-a-lifetime economic crisis of my lifetime. The job market in the US is collapsing. This could be AI, it could be corporate greed, it could be a lot of other things or a mix of things. But this feels different than the other times because there's little awareness or market correlation like in past recessions. We're not in a recession. Unless you're actively looking for a job, you probably don't understand how bad the job market is. This is so true. Here in Germany, the news still talks about there being a shortage of skilled workers, and that really is a huge problem. The reality is that me and all of my friends who graduated college in a technical field are unable to find a job after months of searching and hundreds of applications. I remember as a student applying to kitchen porter jobs in bars or pubs, looking for a minimum of 1 year's experience, and they wouldn't entertain the idea of training someone on, and then seeing news reports saying that the industry is crying out for staff. No, not that kind of staff. We want someone with 5 or more years' experience willing to work for starter wages. Someone so desperate that they'll tolerate any level of crap and thank their exploiter for the opportunity. Then we can keep them so tired, poor, and overworked that they don't have time to look for a better one. It's the perfect system from the employer's point of view. Hopefully, Betelgeuse is a supernova. I'd really like to witness that. I've never seen a supernova blow up, but if it's anything like my old Chevy Nova, it'll light up the sky. Car prices in the United States. Eventually, we'll start to see poorer Americans turn towards motorcycles as a daily driver because we just can't afford cars anymore. Think Vietnam. Nobody makes cheap little crap boxes anymore. It's so sad. There's only so many used cars on the market, and attrition means that every so often, something gets taken out of service that won't ever work again. And all of the new cars are big pricey motherfrickers that a normal middle-class person would have to go into debt for. There's a lot of anger out there. When I was a kid growing up, or even as a young adult, I didn't see this kind of anger where people are so angry that they could really hurt someone over a minor incident. Things that are said, things that people have actually done, indicate that this anger is on the rise. The anger is not from one specific issue, but several. Most of the time, it's been mostly talk and little action. But I fear that those who are so angry are going to commit acts of violence against other people who they see as the enemy. These people are very dangerous to anyone they come into contact with and could blow up at any time. Arctic methane. I believe as the gap between the haves and have-nots continues to widen, we're heading towards some potentially violent times, and we're already seeing it. Juggings, following someone after they go to a bank or ATM and then stealing their money at the next stop, are increasing tremendously. How many celebrities and athletes' homes are broken into while they're out of town? The smash and grabs or the mob smash and grabs? With social media enabling groups or mobs of people to quickly come together, it seems likely that this behavior only increases and mobs will only get bigger, which could overwhelm any law enforcement. Major Pacific Northwest earthquake causing a loss in coastline elevation and significant flooding changes to the coast. Although, I truly hope not. I worry about Cascadia as well. I think the level of changes to the coastline and east to the Willamette Valley will be on a scale that's nearly impossible for most of us to imagine. Chronic stress, the #1 trigger behind most health problems. Until I had a nervous breakdown last year, I never appreciated the neurological impact of the stress I'd been under for decades. The hippocampus actually shrinks due to chronic stress, and has resulted in me losing decades of episodic memory, alongside memory fragmentation so that things are out of order in my mind. I'm physically in my 50s, but my brain is closer to being in its 70s. And the only treatment, by the way? Reduce stress. Easier said than done, right? Biological terror attacks created by a crazed zealot using gene editing equipment ordered off the internet. Kurgeschacht had a good video about this a while back. Basically, their point was that the barrier to entry for creating bioweapons will move from nation-states spending billions of dollars to guy in his basement using AI and CRISPR. It's something that isn't often spoken about in public, but it could be hugely problematic. Look how much chaos and societal impact COVID had. Now imagine multiple viruses with 20-fold the lethality being released constantly.
And this isn't even just limited to people who want to hurt anyone. One hypothetical example I was given once was the idea of someone manufacturing a disease that is ultimately not lethal or particularly problematic, but whose main distinguishing factor is that its structure has a big, obvious nicotine molecule on it. The idea being that this is just a sort of spreadable vaccine that teaches your body that nicotine is an infection, thus meaning that if someone uses tobacco, their body will react with fever and such, and they release it with purely good intentions to discourage tobacco use. There's so much that can go wrong with such an effort, and the cost could be catastrophic.
I hope I'm gone before Mother Earth throws a tantrum and does a soft reset. One towers above the rest as far as humanitarian crises it's going to cause. India is getting too hot to survive in for humans. No country is going to be able to easily absorb the huge numbers of people escaping the inhospitable areas. It's going to be really bad. To put this into context, if the trend of increasing air conditioning use continues at the current rate, India will be using more electricity to power just air conditioners than all the electricity the continent of Africa uses in a year for everything by 2050, and that is not that far away. The big earthquake in LA. I was very young when the 1994 one happened. I could only hope that it will be like that one hilariously corny Dwayne Johnson movie. And yes, I am being silly because this is the second doom and gloom topic I've done in a few short days, and frankly, it's not making me feel nice. Hopefully back to some silly fart joke and instant karma stories soon. The next story sums up my current feeling quite well, actually.
Frick me, I should not have read these answers.
Water shortages. Kessler syndrome. It's basically a runaway effect of debris in orbit. The more debris, the more likely for catastrophic collisions, causing more debris, and that debris causing more collisions, all until space becomes inaccessible due to millions of untrackable pieces of metal hurtling around the planet at tens of thousands of miles per hour. AI misuse. Frank Herbert's Dune was set in a universe where thinking machines had been banned. Back in the day, it seemed like sci-fi goofiness. Sure seems like we could easily see a time where it's a legit threat to a number of critical services humanity relies on for basic functioning. We're talking infrastructure management, data systems, historical record keeping, those kinds of things. The last time inequality was this bad across the West, in the Gilded Age, it led to repeated revolutions and war. Eventually, the rich figured out that paying tax to fund welfare and income redistribution was a better option than hanging off lampposts. They forget these lessons, and here we are again. So I predict we'll witness an explosion in the violence inherent in the system soon. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Mass heat deaths, drought, and then survival migration from those areas. If people think migrants are a problem now, 20 years from now it'll be like that zombie movie where they're crawling over those below them to get into a compound. And they aren't after your stuff or your jobs, they're after a climate that's 5 degrees cooler at least, because wet bulb temps are driving them to travel. People not having basic necessities to live. It definitely brings out the worst in people. Russia's thawing tundra will release enough methane to kill quite a few people and drive even more wars for land by its leaders. China's current lack of water. They've got 20% of the world's population and less than 10% of its water, with much of it not potable and lots of it being contaminated, and a third of its territory not arable and much of it mountainous, rocky or desert, or not easily desirable or livable. They're screwed, so the rest of us will be soon too, by climate refugees, land grabs and wars over fishing, crops and livestock. One that's been bothering me for a long time is the fear of when the next big solar flare or coronal mass injection will hit. If one as powerful as the Carrington event hits today, we may as well say goodbye to basically all technology and power for at least a few months to a few years. And to be honest, we're due for a big one anytime soon.
Well, the sun's been a bit angry lately, and there was a far-sighted full halo CME, and now the sunspot that made that is slowly coming our way. I hope it's big, just not Carrington event big.
Retirement plans in my country. Higher education. I'm not against universities, but in the last 30 years it's gone from something aspirational and meaningful to a corporate money grab and worthless. You're already seeing graduates going into entry-level positions. What's the point in putting yourself into tens of thousands of pounds of debt? just to be an office junior or a checkout assistant at Tesco's. Once people realize it's all just waste, admission numbers will drop, universities will go bankrupt, and all of those tower blocks built of cardboard and sold as student accommodation will be worthless. It's crazy for me to think that there are places where you have to put yourself under 10 to 15 years of debt just to get into higher education, when here in crappy backwater Eastern European country, with reasonably achievable high school graduation, the government just pays for it all. I'm so sorry for you all. At this point, I think an easier to answer question is what isn't a frickin' ticking time bomb that will explode in my lifetime? The Winds of Winter being published. Aliens invading and conquering Earth in the next 10 years is more likely than Winds of Winter ever being released. Social Security. I'm never going to see that money. It's pretty much legal theft at this point for anyone under 50. The use of thermonuclear weapons. Anything you can think of seems to be going off at more or less the same time in the present. I was born in 1991, barely got to the point I'm kind of relatively successful personally and professionally, and instead of keeping this positive trend, all kinds of external bullcrap turns up. Pandemic, war, economic crisis, nuclear threats, social collapse, all kinds of dumb conflicts, climate change, and all of this is led by buttholes in their 70s minimum. We're talking Trump, Putin, Xi, Erdogan, Orban, Khamenei, and Netanyahu. None of whom seem to have anything better to do with their lives than ruin things for the rest of us. At this point, there isn't really a time bomb that I don't expect to blow during my lifetime. The housing market bubble in the US. House prices are through the roof. If 2008 was any indication, there'll be massive turmoil once the bubble pops.
Just wait till you look at the practices that surround buy now, pay later services like Affirm or Klarna. They're bundling bad debt and selling it to a company named 6th Street, which funnily enough was founded in 2009 by an ex-Goldman Sachs partner. If you see any similarities, don't worry about it.
Well, 2008 pre-crash prices occurred because of a massive amount of unaffordable variable rate mortgages that suddenly went kaput. Currently, the prices are high because of scarcity, corporate homeownership, and people locked into low fixed rates giving them an incentive not to move. That's not a bubble that can burst as easily. If things continue the way they are, we'll very soon have a global water crisis on our hands. Soon after, agriculture will become impossible or almost such in many parts of the world. We're absolutely not prepared for what's coming our way, and it's going to hit the world like a speeding train.
My husband's grandma died in her 90s a few years back, and she made us promise not to move to California. We've moved around a lot. She asked us to try to stay near the Great Lakes. She was very convinced about the water crisis, and I don't know. I've learned to take advice from people who grew up in the Depression. The Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub in Portland, Oregon, is essentially a primed mega-disaster, being today ready to succumb to the effects of a large earthquake off the Oregon coast. It is a massive facility for agricultural and petrochemical transfer and storage. Many of the tanks aren't up to current seismic code, and the facility itself is built on alluvial soils, which will liquefy with enough sustained shaking. The combined spill chemicals will form toxic and flammable clouds, and human loss would be very extensive as traffic lanes are congested and the river burns. Solutions are difficult as stakeholders are diverse and many, with blame enough to go around for not addressing the problem now. Truly apocalyptic for that area. The Canadian housing market. I know it's been like this for almost 30 years now, but it really does feel like we're at a breaking point. I'm not really sure if the idea of that gives me hope, as it's frankly the only reasonable way for me to ever own a home in my lifetime, or if it fills me with dread as our GDP is basically propped up by real estate. Either way, it's going to be one hell of an explosion. Welcome to how it is over the rest of the world, my friend. I honestly don't know a country where people aren't indicating that the whole getting into the housing market thing isn't worse than ever. The delegation of congressional authority to the executive branch over the past several decades. Why 2038? I was scrolling down for this answer. Interestingly, an OS fix won't be enough because somewhere in an application stack there can still be 32-bit Unix dates. I retired and left behind a bunch of PHP scripts that would fail because they use 32-bit timestamps. You'd need a PHP version where ints are 64 bits to fix it. I'm not worried because the company will be out of business by 2038 anyway. Hopefully some sort of political revolution that erases the two-party system. People here actually have to care for this to happen. Here in the US, we can barely get people to participate in politics in the first place.
If other people near 30 or younger can't afford a house, what will we buy? RVs? Tiny homes? Rent apartments till we die? Homeless? I mean, this is going to be a crisis. How about our 401k contributions being allowed to be bet on cryptocurrency and private equity? Trillions of dollars tied to people's retirement accounts will enter highly volatile markets. I don't think people understand what you're even talking about because it's so new. A new law passed that basically allows companies to use your 401ks to bail out their speculative investments. Everyone needs to make sure they check their contributions as soon as possible. Taiwan. The Chinese regime has made a deadline for the military to be prepared for this. They've built massive landing crafts specifically made for invading Taiwan, as well as mock-ups made of US ships in the Chinese desert used for target practice. The Taiwanese are too naive to believe this is coming. Westerners don't understand how massive of an impact this invasion would have. And you'd best believe that the chimp in the White House doesn't give a single flying F about Taiwan if the People's Republic of China gives him a sweet enough deal. Our national debt, as it appears most of our current politicians are using their positions for personal gain, knowing that they'll be dead or out of office when the real crap hits the fan. Crypto bubble. Pokemon card bubble too. It's ridiculous at the moment. Surely it'll go back to normal eventually. Endgame capitalism, which is fast approaching. 20th century was the golden age of capitalism, but the system itself is not self-correcting or sustainable like everyone claims. It eventually devolves into what we're heading towards: complete collapse. The system exponentially feeds the top. At the end stages, 100 people will own everything, with a small, wealthy minority behind, while the rest will be struggling to survive. We're not there yet, but we're not too far off either. People will start to revolt and there'll be an irreversible class war. I hope people remember to bring their pitchforks, because the people are going to have their day in the sun once again. To be honest, I doubt a whole lot of people in France realized their whole world was about to collapse as the French Revolution began. A year or two later, there were kings and queens getting guillotined in the public square. Crap can get real crazy when massive amounts of people hit a tipping point. It can get real crazy, real fast. Turns out the teacher's lounge was way darker than we ever imagined. Insider stories. I think the biggest surprise for me was that the teacher I adored as a kid was actually kind of a D-bag. I loved him as a teacher when I was a 14-year-old, but I can't stand him as a colleague. This happened in a weird way to me while I was still in high school. Teacher taught freshmen and seniors. Thought she was amazing as a freshman, seemed laid back and funny. Realized how disorganized and unhelpful she was as a senior. It was awful. My third grade teacher was killed when her car got stuck on the train tracks. Her husband was the principal. After, I found out through parents that everyone was starting to suspect that the principal was seeing one of the teacher's aides. It was one of those uncomfortable things where a lot of the mums were after him because he was single, and so they were incredibly jealous and petty towards this particular aide. Years later, I found out the principal and this aide got married. Years after that, when they were both gone, I started working with my old elementary school. And that is when I found out the truth. That the aide and principal had started having an affair back when my third grade teacher was still alive. She found out about their affair and her death was not an accident. She was actually on the phone with the aide when she purposely drove her car onto the train tracks. I interned at my old elementary school and subbed at the high school. Honestly, it wasn't as wild and debaucherous as some folks wish it to be. My biggest revelations were my old music teacher would fall asleep during after-school meetings and professional development with regularity. The sweet fourth grade teacher actually took no crap at all during after-school meetings if someone was trying to push policy or curriculum that made no sense. And high school teachers would gossip in teachers' lounge about students, though generally only occasionally in passing. And not always scandalous gossip, just generally more aware of each student's social life than I'd ever imagined there'd be. An example would be something like, "Oh, how's Steve today?" "Well, he turned in his homework, but it was incomplete. Didn't really participate today. I heard he and Kristen weren't really talking anymore. Yeah, he seems like he's going through a rough time now, but I think he's going to be better off in the long run." In hindsight, it was weird to consider that these folks were likely talking about me and my personal life in various regards a few years prior. I always assumed my school life was relatively insular, but teachers see a lot more than we think. Oh God, I wonder what my teacher said about me. How can someone behave so much like a nerd and still do so badly at school? Probably best not to contemplate it. Yeah, teachers are ordinary people, folks. All of the staff hated the deputy principal as much as the students did, if not more. I remember my teacher mum telling my dad one day how her principal has turned into such an A1 witch. I found out the school I work at has a decommissioned shooting range in the basement.
Shooting used to actually be taught in US schools. It's probably more widespread than most of us think.
I didn't end up working at my old school, but I did run into my old guidance counselor, who had since moved districts, at a conference. I was mentioning the teachers I'd had and that the photography teacher always creeped me out. He confirmed that said teacher had been quietly fired for his inappropriate conduct around students, and this was at a school where my AP history teacher was actually married to a former student. Nothing to see here, folks. Marriages and divorces, depressions, cancers, all of that crap about the teachers that you sometimes suspected, but never really knew for sure. Also, teachers can be ruthless when talking about kids, but it's funny as hell. Drinking wine with some of my former teachers was frickin' weird, but 100% would recommend. My mum did her student teaching at the Catholic high school she attended. She didn't know that while she'd been away at university, one of her favorite teaching nuns had left the order and gotten hitched. She almost had a heart attack when she recognized Sister Mary Irony in the halls one day and realized she had a solid 7-month pregnant belly. I was a terrible math student, but always pulled A's in geometry. Turns out my mum had been doing special favors for Mr. Davis, my teacher.
Looks like it was your mom who was getting the D's.
I'm not a teacher, but when I was in high school, a racy picture had been discovered on a flash drive that a male teacher gave to students if they didn't have a flash drive, so that they could work on projects from the school computers at home if necessary. Obviously, an investigation went underway, and it was found that another student had put the pictures on the drive. But amidst all the chaos and rampant rumors, it was discovered that the male teacher was having an affair with one of the social studies female teachers, who was also married. The male teacher is still currently with his wife, while the female social studies teacher divorced her husband, thinking that that other guy was leaving his wife for her. Fricking spicy as a 17-year-old. I've got a friend who used to teach social studies, and I almost thought you were talking about her situation for a moment. She got caught in an affair with the Spanish teacher. Both couples ended up getting a divorce. The end result was their former spouses met and got married, the Spanish teacher is now single and sleeping with multiple other teachers, and my friend got fired, never found another teaching job, and moved to another state to try to clean up her reputation. Mrs. X, who was always the jerk advanced placement English teacher. She hated the more inappropriate parts of our advanced placement English books. Turns out her husband had cheated on her, and she was in the middle of an unpleasant divorce. No wonder she couldn't stand any doing of the deed in famous literature. I'm definitely not sorry for feeling she was a jerk, but boy, did it suddenly make a lot more sense. My mum is a teacher at a school I went to, and I still learned a few things. 2 things come to mind. The kinda reserved science teacher has a full sleeve of tattoos. That was a bit of a surprise. Also, every year the school does a raffle with a bunch of cool little items in it. I found out recently that it's rigged to go to a poor student. I mean, I'm not complaining, but I always really wanted to win it. I was shocked when I found this out. My dad used to be the head teacher of a school that fixed the raffle in the exact same way. They told the kid that he'd won and sent him home with a huge gift hamper. The next day, my dad asked the kid if he'd eaten any of the chocolate yet, and the kid said, "Yep, the whole bar." My dad was surprised because there was a lot more than one chocolate bar in that hamper, so he asked a few more questions. Turns out the kid's mum had immediately sold the entire hamper for substance money except for that one bar of chocolate. I worked at the school I attended. Nothing too weird, but drinking and hanging out with your former teachers and principals is kinda cool, honestly. Rampant smoking. When I was in junior high, I got to keep a project in the teacher's lounge, and for a week I was treated to the permanent cloud of smoke that hung in it. Everybody except the gym teachers smoked like chimneys. In between periods, they'd run to the lounge for a quick drag or two and then dash back to their rooms. I have no idea how they managed after smoking in public buildings was banned. After smoking in public buildings was banned, there was a law stating you couldn't smoke unless you were X meter away from the schools, as some teachers would run to the gate and smoke there. All of a sudden, we were having issues with students smoking in the bathrooms. Fun part was, the smoke never came from the students' bathrooms. My school had an old lunchroom, an entire portion of the building that was only accessible through 2 doors. I can't say with certainty that this is true, but rumor has it several teachers ended up turning that room into a suitable living area and slept there for a few months. I didn't think it was that crazy until I remembered that at least 2 of those teachers had a history of substance use. We're talking your Lucy in the Skies with Diamonds, your Molly, and your White Snow. What went on in that old lunchroom is anyone's guess. My 4th grade teacher was being treated horribly by her husband. Not only that, she was his 4th wife. The first one divorced him, the next 2 disappeared, and the husband is now on death row for my teacher's murder. We discovered that they have a secret basement. My school did too, and there was a rumor that there was a tunnel as well that connected the high school to the one across the road. 2 guys from our drumline found the secret basement and ended up getting suspended because of it. It was supposed to be a secret, but the entire band knew why. Our high school had that too, but we were split into 2 campuses, so the rumor was that they'd connected the campuses. Turns out it was a shooting range over 30 years ago, and now it's just the basement area underneath the pool. It was pretty neat. I was on swim team, so we got to check it out. It had a one-sided glass window, so you can watch people doing turns at the walls and watch the flipping technique. Huh, if I had a nickel for every time that a school had a secret former weapons range underground, I'd have 2 nickels, which admittedly isn't a lot, but it is weird that it happened twice.
I work in IT at my old school district. All of the teachers are just as immature as the students they teach, and most of the nicer teachers turn out to be jerks to their coworkers and horrible to work with. Also, everything is political and cliquey. Same experience for the most part. I found out that the teachers who were nicer to the social misfits typically were the most decent human beings. The football coach, who I knew, had changed the culture of the team. They were the stereotypical football jocks prior to him. He was a great guy too, and he held his kids to a higher standard than any other kids. The ones who were the cool teachers were the ones who were absolutely terrible people. I also found out the principal I had was widely disliked by everyone. Oh yeah, and another bit of an eye-opener that nobody knows. The major, largest problem with public schools is terrible administration. The school board chooses the top leadership, leadership chooses the building admins, and the admins choose the teachers. The school board doesn't like to admit they've made a mistake, so getting rid of terrible district administration is difficult. Additionally, upper administration tends to be a political position, so the worst of these are the best at making the board people happy via political means. At this point, the cascade downwards is obvious. Bad administrators won't stick their necks out for the good building admins or teachers, who will then leave. But then they also won't stick their necks out to fire bad building admin or teachers. So good teachers watch bad teachers run the school, it's all political again, and then they leave. The end result of voting in a bad board member can be a complete ruining of school culture within as short as 5 years. Meanwhile, the good people up and down the chain get out of education. Vote in your board elections and you know who you're voting for. It means the world to where you live. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? You should hear the way teachers talk about students. They're brutally honest in teachers' meetings.
And in the halls after the students are gone while their custodian is walking by collecting their room's trash. I told one of them just the other day that,
"There's a reason why I do what I do instead of what you do."
This is kind of related, I'd say. It's about my school rather than the specific teachers. My high school had a theatre and put on a huge production every year, along with smaller things like talent shows and such throughout it. There was a light and sound crew that was open to any student that worked on building the sets, alongside setting up lights and sound. I was on the crew for a while, and the leader was a teacher/director that I highly respect, but he was also super chill and a good judge of character, trusting us with keys and access to stuff that students would never see. One of my friends, who was a higher up in the crew, unlocked and took us through some tunnels underneath the school. I had no idea that they ran underneath around 75% of the school. Our high school was pretty large, we're talking like 1,000 people. You had to crouch to go through at some points, and there was even a trapdoor from them that was in a janitor's closet attached to a teacher's lounge. It's funny to think I've walked past the wall the closet was behind so many times and never knew that there was a trapdoor to underground tunnels that I never thought might be there. Oh boy, have I got a story. I worked in the same department as my old teacher, one of the people who made me want to be a teacher in the first place. It was pretty cool. One day we were at a bar, and he's telling me his biggest horror stories and mentions a girl that I knew from high school. Turns out she was doing things with other kids during class under the stairs. We only found out because she confessed to my co-teacher. Apparently some kids had not paid her, and she was really upset about the whole ordeal, and she thought my colleague would be the only one who might listen. He was shocked, to say the least. She was right, and he worked with the right counselors in the school to get her back on track and deal with some trauma. It never really spread around the school, and I walked with her when I graduated. It was another checkmark on the list of why I looked up to him as a teacher, though, and I try to be as open about listening to my students now. For some clarification, since I don't want him to come off as a jerk, this stemmed from me speaking to him about a student confessing to buying substances for their family. I was a new teacher and I wasn't fond of having to be a mandatory reporter. His advice stemmed from this story about the student that he had had and other horror stories. He gave them to me as an example that reporting to the right people can actually make someone better. He wasn't just bragging about somebody I might have known. A lot of students would pass just because we didn't want to deal with them anymore, or because their failure would hurt funding and we were pressured to overlook failure of certain students. I taught at a technical school for one semester. I was forced to quit when I refused to pass an obviously failing student. The school's director brought me into his office and specifically said that if the student didn't pass, they'd lose his tuition and I'd be fired if I didn't pass him. I walked out in disgust. I learned from another teacher who I met in the pub that my Year 9 chemistry teacher was basically a less interesting Walter White. This one comes from an old teacher of mine. Whilst in Year 10, my language teacher and a PE teacher were having a secret relationship, despite everyone knowing that they were both in relationships with other people. Whilst doing my teacher training at a different school, I saw her briefly in the staff room. Later, I caught up with someone else who'd worked there and said how I knew her. Found out that she actually married this PE teacher a couple of years before and was having an affair with another PE teacher in that school. Fast forward to going into my 3rd year of teaching, at the interview for the school which I currently work at now. Speaking to another guy at the interview, and he told me which school he was leaving, and it was my old secondary school. I asked him if he knew my old language teacher and the gossip of her, and he said he knew they weren't together anymore. The day goes on, I just finish having a tour of the school, walk into the staff room, and there she is, sat there on her laptop. Turns out she had also been recently employed there. Some PE teachers came in, also on their interviews, and she made a beeline for the young male who was clearly about to start teaching. I mean, she clearly has a type. Oh boy. For all of the things that school can teach one, perhaps learning from your past mistakes is one of those common sense things that a person just can't hammer into themselves with a curriculum. I worked at an after-school childcare center at a Catholic school. This was in an affluent community around the time of the Catholic Church scandal in the early 2000s. I didn't realize how many complaints of misconduct the school received regularly. While I was a young student attending that school in the 90s, one of our priests just suddenly disappeared. We were told he moved to a church that needed him. I found out later he was dismissed when accusations of a sort rather prolific against the Catholic Church in the 2000s came up. But he wasn't removed from the priesthood. True to what I was told as a young student, he was just moved to another parish. No investigation was opened up against him. Nobody went to the police. I found out later when I was actually working there just how such a thing could happen. I was required to attend a seminar which outlined the behavioral and physical symptoms of inappropriate conduct and the methods to approach a child and ask them if they feel safe and free to be kids in their environment. So far, a pretty solid presentation, a lot of good points and valuable information. But of course, things go off the rails when I'm then instructed that it's church policy that we relegate all accusations and red flags to a designated 1-800 phone number that's managed by the Los Angeles Archdiocese. Note that this is the archdiocese managed by the only man I'll ever punch in the face if I meet him in person, Cardinal Roger the Creep Peddler Mahoney. Seriously, I'll very happily mess him up. He shouldn't be retiring comfortably in an affluent mansion in Santa Barbara. He should be living the rest of his undeserved life eroding away in a jail cell. I'm disgusted just thinking that in high school, this is the same man who laid hands upon my shoulder during my confirmation ceremony and welcomed me to the church. Because it turns out, at the same time he rested his hand on my shoulder, he was operating a massive cover-up operation. He was constantly transferring priests to different parishes the moment accusations would be made against them, making it almost impossible for a proper follow-through with the victims. So these priests would always be put into a new community with new victims, none the wiser to them. And the seminar that I was attending was requiring me to be instrumental to Mahoney's cover-up. They wanted me to direct victims and their families to a 1-800 prayer line where they'd be gaslit into not calling the authorities, where they'd be assured they'll be taken care of immediately while the church actually does absolutely nothing. I spoke up about it to my co-workers, saying I refused to give victims the church-sanctioned pamphlet with the 1-800 number, saying I'd go to the police instead. My supervisor responded by telling the program director what I said, and I was blindsided with a one-on-one meeting with the director where I was derided for refusing to comply. She said to me, "Do you not take these things seriously?" That always stuck out to me, because at the time I was just a young college student with very little experience in handling adversity or getting vociferously reprimanded by my boss's boss. I should have replied with the obvious, "Yes, I do. The problem is you guys frickin' don't." But nah, I was young and just wanted to keep my job there. Which didn't help anyway because my hours were cut significantly under the pretense that I was a liability and needed to work the same hours as my supervisor, meaning all the days my supervisor had off and the last hour after she left were pulled from my schedule. It gave me a sense of validation and, yeah, I'll admit, a bit of smug satisfaction seeing the Los Angeles Archdiocese get absolutely frickin' obliterated in a class action civil suit. It put all of their wrongdoings into legal documentation, it absolved me of any guilt in not being more forthcoming about this policy to authorities, and it forced Roger Mahoney out of a position to continue circulating about his ring of awful priests and their despicable crimes. Albeit it didn't force him into a federal penitentiary, but considering how crappy the whole thing is, I'll take what I can get. I was a private school teacher at a school I attended as a student. The school had no infrastructure for special education or IEP students. They basically told parents they could send students there, but they're not getting any additional accommodation. I never connected or understood this as a kid, but every time we'd get a different student, they rarely lasted more than a year at the school. I found out over a decade after being at a school that there was a secret shelter under the school property that you could access through a creepy dark tunnel under the stage in the theater. It was set up like a little lounge and only the most artsy of students ever got to go in there. Also, my history and law teacher took pretty much every female teacher in that school to Pound Town. I'm a student teacher, but not at the school I attended. However, I'm teaching in an area that I'm very familiar with. I find out a lot of sad things about students, stuff like who's got mental health issues, who's being bullied, and who's a 504/IEP. I also find out who all the teachers hate in their team. I never really paid attention to any of that when I was in school, and I lived in a privileged area. This experience is seriously eye-opening. I also learned that a lot of teachers don't follow the law when it comes to grades and deadlines. Adults aren't that different from children. Delivery drivers reveal their most unhinged encounters. Weirdest drop-offs ever. I was delivering a pizza, and after I knocked on the door, I heard a faraway voice yell, "Coming!" So I waited. After about a minute, I heard the same voice a little closer yell, "Almost there, just wait." This continued for several minutes, with the voice coming closer and closer until the person finally reaches the door and opens it. I'm expecting to see someone at eye level. However, instead I'm greeted by a smiling person on the floor who had no legs and dragged themselves across the house to answer the door. I offered to put the pizza inside for them in the kitchen, and they were pretty appreciative. The guy who answered the door looked like he'd just seen a ghost and was a bit jittery, so I'm pretty sure he was on some kind of substances. Anyways, he hands me $10 for a $15 bill and tries to go back inside real quick. I realize that he didn't hand me enough money, so I knock on the door and tell the guy he still owed me like $5. So he starts patting his pockets and finally pulls his hand out as if to give me more money, but he's got nothing in his hand. He extended his hand to give me this imaginary coinage and was visually surprised when I wasn't fooled by his trickery. The guy does this 2 or 3 more times before having me call my manager to attempt to use his card to pay, even though I'm sure he knew it wouldn't work. At this point, he goes back inside because he just heard his roommate come in and he's going to borrow money from him. So I wait and I wait until I knock again. The guy cracks the door, sees it's me, and closes the door again really quick, like he was surprised I didn't go away. Eventually, after about 10 minutes of irritation and feeling like I might get shanked, I told the guy I either needed the money or the food, which he reluctantly gave back. All in all, a very strange experience. In short, delivered to a smacked-out dude who tried to nick me into accepting imaginary money. So I delivered like 5 pizzas to this guy once. I had to ring the doorbell several times before he came to the door. When he got there, he didn't really say anything except to come in real quick. Now, you're not supposed to go into people's houses, but I decided, who cares, I can defend myself. I get inside this guy's huge house, and it is full of weird crap. There was a full suit of armor right by the door, and somewhere he had his Halloween CD playing creepy, deep-voiced laughs. While he's searching for his wallet, the biggest dog I've ever seen walks up to me and just falls at my feet, pushing me over. So I'm sitting next to a suit of armor petting this massive dog, waiting for a middle-aged man to pay me. He gave me a $40 tip. I love crazy rich people. I know that I would have been worried about getting chloroformed and waking up in the basement, so I admire your gumption. I'd have assumed the dog was in on it too and run screaming out of the house, followed by that happy bear dog boy as well. A man answered the door in a robe. The robe was closed, but I guess he wasn't wearing undies, because as we're exchanging money, a stream of pee starts to just drop between his legs and right onto his own carpet. He doesn't seem to notice, or just doesn't care. I take a big step back out of the splash zone, and he just keeps making small talk while it's happening.
Was he old? He may legitimately not have noticed.
He wasn't too old, early 50s. I'm not sure how he didn't notice. The sound of a heavy stream of that hitting the carpet is honestly pretty loud. I should have mentioned this was delivery for a pharmacy. I believe he had a mental disability, as I recall he was getting psych meds. Pulled up to this easily $1 or $2 million house, a lady opens the door, and as she's signing the receipt I hear, "Bethany, Willis is in the dog food again." This is deep in Louisiana, so this is all in a typical southern drawl. I look behind her and see a man chasing a full-grown, pot-belly pig wearing a Louisiana State University jersey away from what I assume is the dog food area. Willis then returned to the area shortly after.
Wait, was the man or the pig in the LSU jersey?
The pig. It was actually pretty cute. In 2005, I delivered 30 pizzas to an Amish family. About a 35-minute drive. The entire family met me outside to grab a pizza. I took the rest in and followed them inside to their dining table. The elder of the family gestured for me to sit down with them, and he pointed to the one open seat. I realized that they'd saved me a seat to eat with them. I didn't know too much about the Amish back then, and I wasn't sure how rude it would be to have to say that I'm working and couldn't or shouldn't. I was also thinking, on the other hand, they could have killed me. Remember, I wasn't an educated 16-year-old. So I just sat down and ate 2 slices of pepperoni pizza with them. I found the girl across the table to be very attractive. They said a prayer of some sort and didn't talk much after that. Just asked my name and how thankful they were for me to drive all that way. I finally had to get back to work. They didn't tip, which was fine. I enjoyed the time with them. To answer the questions I'm getting about how they ordered, I don't know about all families, but I saw a lot of Amish heads of household, fathers typically, carrying big blocky cell phones for business purposes. Besides farming, a lot of the families made furniture for the clothes displays in stores and at malls and such. They had huge barns to make furniture. They'd have huge generators behind the buildings to run the equipment. They couldn't be connected to city power, and the generators couldn't run electricity for the house or lights, but the rules for the barn were different somehow. They aren't as disconnected as one may think. However, their house was completely standard by Amish terms. Still had to heat up the bath the old-fashioned way, and there were flies all over the place and no fans. I didn't see how they kept their food cold, if that was at all possible during the summer. No washer or dryer, but the generators sure did help with their business practices, like running power tools and such. They also don't drive, but they have vans and they would hire a non-Amish driver to take them to the city sometimes. Was delivering to a neighborhood that typically was kinda sketchy, so I always expected no tip or a very small one. I rolled up to one lady's house and she said something along the lines of,
"I don't have the money and my husband will be here in 20 minutes with some cash."
It was the last delivery of the night, so I wasn't worried about taking too long, and then she opened up her garage door. There was a pool table and fridge and TV in there, and she gave me a beer and we played pool until her husband came and gave me the money along with a $20 tip. One of the better nights working that job. Strangest I had was a girl who put on her special instructions, "Please tell me I'm pretty." I did. She smiled and said thanks, closed the door, and I never saw her again. Maybe one day I'll get lucky. This was my first month of delivering pizzas. I pulled up to a fourplex, 2 floors, 2 apartments per floor, and I knocked on the correct door. After a minute, an old scruffy Russian-sounding guy answers the door and says, "How much?" I told him the total and he walks off to get the money. I look over to my right and I can see the top of his wife's head poking over the back of a recliner. She's gabbing away with a friend on the phone, just going on and on. After a minute or two of listening to her wondering what's taking this guy so long, I hear a change jar being emptied on the counter. Oh, this guy's gonna pay me with all change and doesn't even have it counted. Crap. I sighed hard, but was thankful we were slow at the time, so I wouldn't really miss out on any money waiting for this guy. So here I am, listening to this old lady blabbing on, not understanding pretty much anything she's saying, while I can hear the old man scooting change around as he counts it. Finally, after a solid 5+ minutes of standing there, the old man walks out and says something to his wife in a foreign language. She rotates the chair around so I can clearly see her, and there is no phone. I immediately stuck my head inside looking for a phone. I can see the table by the chair is empty, and there's nothing on her hands, on her lap, or on the floor. I looked everywhere for this phone, and there wasn't one. She was literally talking to herself, or I guess the wall. I started going crazy in my head, wondering what was going on. She starts talking to the air again and turns her chair back towards the wall. The guy goes and grabs the money and hands me a bag. It was filled with nickels and dimes. There wasn't a quarter or silver dollar or anything. I just looked at him, bewildered, and then to her, mouth slightly agape, wondering what was happening. "Is 20 cents for you?" I said nothing. I turned around with my bag of change and walked back to my car. The whole thing took about 15 minutes, most of which was spent with me standing in a wide-open door in the middle of summer, listening to a crazy old lady talk to the wall. When I got back to the store, I plopped the bag of money down and explained what happened. My manager says, "You never know what to expect. Heck, a few months ago someone delivered to an adult movie shoot and saw all of the women walking around buck wild. Never found out if that one was true or not, but I like to think it was." I'm pretty sure I saw that movie. Well, it had a pizza delivery guy in it at least. Come to think of it, it could have been any number of those movies. Must happen a lot. I know of a kid who was a substance addict that had pizza delivered to his house. Once he heard his doorbell, he walked out his back door with a ski mask on and robbed the delivery driver in front of his own home. After that, he walked back around the home and opened the front door from inside, pretending to be surprised that the guy was robbed. The idiot ended up getting arrested, but it was the worst plan ever hatched by somebody that I knew. I had a delivery that needed to be signed for, and nobody answered the door when I knocked. I went to my car to write a notice slip when this woman starts waving me up and pointing to the back of the house. So I walk back there, and she isn't there. In fact, nobody's there, so I go to knock on the back siding door. A guy in his 60s, weighing at least 300 pounds, answers and is wearing nothing but a small as frick shirt. He's kind of pulling down the front to cover his hanging berries, but his dogs were barking and he spun around and bent down in their little faces, yelling at them. Butthole right in my face. Then he turns back and I ask him to sign for his package. He lets go of his shirt, which of course bounces up to his belly button, and lets all of the components of his manhood fly and bounce free. I got the signature and race walked back to the car to get the heck out of there. It was so uncomfortable. They had a plan, they made a timeline and factored in all of the variables, set up cameras and got their game on. You messed it all up by not ringing the doorbell and saying, "Did someone order a pizza?" You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? This is probably not answering correctly, but it was still weird. Delivered to this house and I noticed that they were in the garage, so I went over to the garage door. They actually had a whole glass blowing operation in their garage and showed me the whole in and out of the operation. They gave me a brand new bowl they'd just blown and a good amount of green herb for a tip. Not weird like uncomfortable, just different than usual. I once delivered pizza to what seemed like a gang house. I pulled up and there were all these intimidating dudes with tattoos and bandanas, all wearing the same colored clothes. I puckered up and felt my manhood shrivel as I awkwardly shuffled past them with a bunch of pizzas to ring the doorbell. They were all staring me down and it felt like the longest walk ever. The person who ordered the pizza must have been the head honcho because he looked like the baddest of the bunch. The total was like $70 and he gave me a $100 bill and told me to keep the change. I bolted out of there and returned back to the pizza place on autopilot because I was so scared. "You got a $30 tip though, what a cool dude." Yeah, it was, actually one of the most generous I've gotten, but generosity was not the first thing on my mind during this transaction. I was a delivery boy for an Asian restaurant for quite a while. Had a delivery down a sketchy, very bumpy road in the back of my small town near all these retailers. When they answered the door, there was a 50 to 60-year-old lady standing completely undressed in front of me, as well as two men of the same age sitting on the couch with their ding-dongs out, again, completely undressed. I obviously got out of there as fast as possible, took her signature and nearly ran away. She yelled at me through the window, "Come inside with us," and I said, "Frick no," as I was walking away, and she proceeded to curse at me as I jogged back towards my car. It's interesting what kind of people you meet. I mean, mine is tame compared to some of these, but literally my first day doing deliveries, I punch the address into my phone and arrive as quickly as possible. Neighborhood is a bit shady, but no judgment. Note on the door is really bad handwriting, but it says to knock because the doorbell is broken. Nothing unusual so far. Guy opens the door, old scruffy skinny white guy. Says to come to the kitchen, that's where his cash is. At that moment I realize I shouldn't enter a stranger's house, but I didn't really have an excuse ready, like company policy says no or something. So the next thing I know I'm in his living room? That's what it should be anyways, but it's full of retail clothing racks full of clothes and a couple of mannequins. Needless to say, I thought I was going to be murdered, but we get to the kitchen where the money and a cat are on the counter. He shuffles through the cash, pays me an exact change and just takes the pizza to another room. So I walk back through the store to the front left and leave. Now I always have an excuse ready. I work for a company called AITA. Basically, we were partnered with certain restaurants and we'd deliver for them. It was my last drop of the night, and when we got to the door, something smelled rather musky. I knocked and waited a few moments until the door opened. There stood a man with a massive glass pipe looking medicated beyond belief. It took me a couple of minutes to explain who I was and why I was giving him food. He was as friendly as could be. He even offered to share his food and green herb with me because I was such a sweet guy for coming all the way out here. I was a Chinese food delivery girl back in high school. Mid to late 50-year-old man comes to the door in an opened towel robe wearing Spider-Man undies. This gentleman opened the door very casually and honestly. I didn't think much of his undies. What was really funny was from the other room I heard what I assumed to be his wife call out, "Is that Chinese or pizza? Did I win?" The man saw the white plastic bag and sighed, "You won." As he was closing the door, after giving a generous tip, all I could hear was a celebratory "woo" from the woman. I delivered pizza for a few years in college. One of my deliveries to a hotel had a guy answer the door in nothing but boxers and a beanie. We traded money for the pizza, as I give him his change, and I hear another guy yell, unseen from behind the corner, "If he's cute, we'll let him keep the rest." The guy at the door hands me back the change and smiles. I wasn't sure how to react, so I just turned and left. This happened just yesterday. I was having a lady sign her CC slip when an undressed toddler comes running from the backyard. Okay, cool, sometimes kids go crazy like that, so what? The thing is, she had no idea whose kid it was. Just a random buck-wild baby running through like they owned the place. What do you do when that happens? What's the appropriate response to finding an unknown, stark-as infant in your place of dwelling? Is there a solution that doesn't open one up to some sort of legal trouble if it's perceived in the wrong way? How do you manage this situation? This was a few years back, but it's still crazy to me. Pulling up, the house was already a bit strange since there were a lot of cars in the yard and the neighboring yards too, and I was only delivering one pizza. I assumed there was a party and I was delivering to the chaperone or something. I was invited into the foyer by a lady, and I obliged. Normally we don't go into houses, but I remembered overhearing something about special instructions. The lady asked me if I'd take the pizza into the basement. Alarms immediately went off in my head. I politely tried to get out of that request, stating we were busy and making excuses. She persisted politely and said she'd tip me better, which just reinforced the alarms. Again, I politely refuse. She gets a sad look and says, "Oh well, the kids will be disappointed." Being the sap that I am, I ask what exactly was going on downstairs. She told me there was a youth group and I was just going to go downstairs to deliver a pizza to the speaker or something. I reluctantly agreed and headed into the basement. I was expecting maybe a dozen littler kids, like 8 to 10 years old. I get downstairs and the place is packed with teenagers. Probably 20 to 30 kids down there, all chattering and stuff, evidently waiting for me. When they finally noticed me, the room exploded with energy and everyone started chanting, "Pizza, pizza." Thoroughly confused, I make my way to the guy with a microphone. He asks me my name and I tell him, and the crowd starts chanting it. The guy informs me that I just won the Pizza Olympics, hangs a medal around my neck, with a pizza picture taped onto said medal, and a volleyball trophy that looked like the person was serving a little black box. Crowd goes bananas again. I'm utterly confused and make my way back upstairs as they keep cheering. The lady upstairs thanks me, and I go back to the store, trophy and medal in hand. I still have the medal, the trophy got misplaced at the store sadly. Every time I tell the story, people think I was an absolute fool, which I was, because it seemed like an obvious kidnapping trap, right? I'm so thankful it wasn't. I'm not sure I'll be able to top that one. In short, got invited into a basement of a nice house, might have been kidnapped, got a trophy instead. I was a pizza delivery boy back in high school. I was delivering on Super Bowl Sunday during my senior year, and one of the houses I delivered at felt bad for me. They told me to come in and watch the game, so I stayed there for a while. I watched a full quarter before going back to work. I knew I was leaving for college soon enough anyway, so the possibility of getting fired didn't faze me. As a side note, my boss asked me what happened, I told him the truth, and he kept me around. I continued working there on breaks from college, and 15 years later, I'm still friendly with my old boss. He works at the same pizza place, and I go there with my family sometimes. I was delivering pizza once in a pretty sketchy neighborhood, and I came up to a gated apartment complex where I saw a guy waving me down. Sometimes customers in apartment complexes used to meet us outside if they knew their complex was complicated, so I'm thinking, what a nice guy. Turns out, I was horribly wrong. I let this complete rando into my car who reeks of liquor and cigarettes. I somehow get the words out, hey man, is this your pizza? The guy is barely coherent and responds with, no, I just need a ride. I'm freaking out at this point and wondering when the weapons or threats are going to come out, and I nervously respond with, dude, I totally would, but I can't. I've got pizzas to deliver. Look, check it out. He keeps asking, and I just keep repeating myself saying if I wasn't working, I'd totally help him out. I'm going to get fired. And after about 10 minutes, the guy stumbles out of my car and goes on his merry way. So freaky lesson learned, double check before letting drunk strangers into your car. I made one pizza delivery out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere. The driveway had one of those partial fences that was basically just a corner of fencing on either side of the driveway, and both sides of it had a "Beware of Dog" sign on it. As I pulled up, I could have sworn I saw two glowing red eyes at the end of the driveway in the darkness past the end of my headlights. I was thinking, damn, that's got to be one big dog. But that was that. Most of the large dogs I've known were cool, and I had to deliver the pizza either way. So as I get out and go into the back seat to get the pizza bag, I hear what I can only describe as stampeding footsteps. I already had my hand on the bag, so I grabbed it and moved it out of the way. I swear on my life a full-grown goat jumped horns first into my back seat and just sat there like, I'm going for a ride. I struggled, pulling on his horns, timidly at first and then using a little more force. After about 10 minutes, I hear a loud, low voice say, hey, have you seen my goat? I told him it was in my back seat. This very large Native American guy used one hand and yanked the goat out of my car. He tipped me almost the full price of his check for my troubles. It was pretty strange. In short, delivered a pizza and had a goat jump in the back of my car. Struggled with the stubborn thing until its owner dragged it out. Great tip though.
They lied to us in elementary school? The facts that were total BS. That if you touch a baby duck, its mother will reject it. Ducks do not give an F. I've seen two mama ducks cross paths and unknowingly exchange a few babies with each other. That if someone's picking on you, that means that they like you. No. Some people are crappy bullies and are picking on you just because you're an easy target. Yeah. Walk away, just ignore them and they'll stop. I tried that. Finally snapping and knocking someone on their butt proved a lot more effective. I learned in kindergarten that emperor penguins were the same height as us, which I guess was true at the time, but as I grew, I still thought that they were the same height as I was. Then, as a teenager, I was surprised when I saw penguins at the zoo that were only like 3 or 4 feet or so, and not my actual height. Being told that my shenanigans couldn't or wouldn't slide in high school. I was told in the 4th grade that teachers wouldn't accept anything but cursive in high school in college. Joke's on you, Miss Leons. Teachers didn't accept anything handwritten. That cracking your fingers gives you arthritis. My mum always said it causes arthritis. When I finally convinced her it didn't, she said it caused your knuckles to swell larger than usual. Still not sure if that's true. No, it's not. Cracking your knuckles just stretches the space between your joints, and that space has fluid in it to cushion your joints. The cracking sound is just air bubbles in that fluid popping. No harm done, no arthritis, and no larger knuckles. That I can't use my notes in life? The frick does that even mean? I'm always looking at my notes when I do my job. My most realistic to actual life tests were open notes, open book, open whatever, but purposefully designed so that there were more problems than you could finish in the allotted time if you were flipping around searching for a formula that you knew exists, but didn't know where it is. And I had a physics professor in college around 2010 that let us use formulas, no numbers, on a cheat sheet, because even professionals referenced them. His thinking was that if we didn't know how to apply said formulas, we wouldn't know how to get answers anyway. That class was still difficult as F, with really complicated exam questions.
Still makes more sense than memorizing PV equals nRT. Yeah, I'm actually annoyed about that now. I have Google and I reference stuff constantly all the time at every officey adult job I've ever done. Why the heck did everyone tell us we'd have to memorize every process for everything in our lives? That's annoying. That illegal substances would be easy to come by, you'd make friends easily, and that people would be helpful when you're in need and if you ask. That being an astronaut is way harder than they sell it as a palpable career. Each generation since the space race started thought the next generation would have a lot more people living and working in space. If you told someone in 1970 that in 2022 nobody would have been to the moon in 50 years, they would not believe you. We had a teacher tell us that we only had so many uses before our vocal cords stopped working, so wasting it small-talking during class would cause us to go mute in our 30s. My grandma used to playfully tell me to save my kisses when I'd smooch her a bunch, which to 5-year-old me meant that kisses must run out at some point. I thought about this and remember deciding that kissing grandma was worth it, even if I did run out. I'd just need to be conservative with kisses for other people. That if I made faces, my face was going to get stuck like that. That Napoleon was short. Turns out he was average height for his time, and it was just British propaganda representing how small of a threat they perceived him to be. And he had the biggest guys in France as his personal bodyguards, so he generally looked smaller than he really was. Carrots improving your eyesight at night? Come on! It was started by the British back in World War II in an attempt to mask the fact that they'd developed an improved radar system. I always just imagined some Germans hate munching on carrots to try and test the theory. That I should never stand up to a bully. I should stop reacting so they'd get bored and leave me alone. That if I ever fought back, I'd be suspended, so it wouldn't be worth it. Don't worry, every time I went to the teachers for help, I was told I needed to share my lunch so it wouldn't get stolen. I needed to be more forgiving and understanding because the girl who attacked me was on the cheer team. So this didn't give me some lasting problems with conflict. Nope. Fighting a bully and making it a sure thing that they'll not get away unscathed is the only way to temporarily stop them. They'll do the unconscious risk and reward calculation in their head and think, last time I did this I still won, but I had some bruises. Maybe I'll pick an easier target for a while. This guy I knew in high school only actually stopped bullying when someone gave him a traumatic brain injury by hitting him from behind with a half brick, after he and his mates had kicked the guy's brother on the ground until he was unconscious. Those two kids were sent to another school, and the bully showed up like 3 more days the rest of the school year with a helper. I'm not condoning this, but I can't condemn it either. That if I went to college, I'd get a good job and be able to buy a big house with a pool. Now I'm an adult, a pool just seems like a massive pain. You got a fence in your yard, your homeowner's insurance is going to cost more, got to buy a bunch of chemicals, test the water often, the water bill's going to be through the roof the month you fill it, and you maybe get to use it 3 months out of the year before you drain it and cover it for the winter. This'll go down on your permanent record. I hear Santa keeps a pretty detailed record. Funny story, apparently when I was really little, I was something of a smart aleck. And one time when I was misbehaving, my mum threatened to pick up the phone and call Santa to tell him I was being bad if I didn't behave. I apparently retorted that Santa should already know anyway, so why did she need to call him? And she didn't know how to respond to that. That all of my high school teachers and my professors, once I got to college, would require cursive. If I tried to hand one of my professors a paper written in all cursive, I'm pretty sure they'd kill me on the spot. I had professors who wouldn't accept handwritten work at all because we had blind grading, and they didn't want to risk recognizing our handwriting. You won't always have a calculator in your pocket. Not even that long ago I was told that. Smartphones were literally already a thing when they said that. Even before smartphones, if your job involved math, you absolutely would have a calculator available. And before calculators, the slide rule in the front pocket was a basic part of an engineer's business attire. Pilots had navigational and fuel calculation slide rules and stuff. I sometimes do math on paper though, because phone is on the charger in the other room and I'm too lazy to get it. That blood is blue before it touches the air. I was taught this one as well. We were taught that if you stuck your arm in a plastic bag and cut something, the blood would flow blue. I literally have no idea how or why we were taught this one. Why would a teacher ever explain it this way? You know some kid's gonna try it. We were once forced to do this profession test to find out our dream job, and one of the options was to become a Pokemon trainer. To this day, nobody ever offered me a starter Pokemon. I got Garbage Man because I answered yes to a lot of the outdoorsy questions. and my teacher made fun of me for it and said this is probably what I'd be. She wasn't fond of me because I was a smart aleck. Honestly, to this day, I've thought being a street sweeper would be cool. Early mornings, nobody on the road, just cruising along listening to music, and then occasionally dumping dirt in front of somebody's house that I didn't like. Apparently, bears just nap a lot in the winter and don't take a 3-month mega nap. Hibernation is reserved for frogs and some mammals. We use the word for long slumbers, but we do use it incorrectly. As a Canadian, our teacher would tell us things like squirrels hibernate, while we watched them run around outside the window in -20.
I was shocked to read this, and when I looked it up, it says that bears sleep for weeks at a time and can sleep for 100 days without eating, drinking, or passing water. The difference between what they do, which is called torpor, and what smaller mammals can do, like true hibernation, is that in torpor you can wake easily if threatened. Smaller animals like chipmunks lower their body temperature below freezing and their heart rate from 350 beats per minute to 4 beats per minute so they can't come online quickly if found or threatened. So yeah, I don't know that I'd call this a lie as much as a simplification.
That is fascinating to be honest. So we can sneak up on a frozen chipmunk or frog for an easy meal, but not on a bear or wolf. Not that any of us stand a chance against those latter two, regardless of how slow they are to wake. Taste bud zones. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, that's all what I was taught. Also, the frickin' food pyramid has changed so much, it's ridiculous.
That's because the food pyramid was propaganda and the lies it sat upon have been disproven by science.
That in high school you can only write with pens and only write in cursive. Both of these claims were false.
Granted, if I write on any official documents at work using a pencil, I'll get a talking to by our VP of Quality and Documentation.
Nobody has offered me substances yet. The DARE program made it seem like I'd have to be running away from people in vans offering me sweet doobies every time I went on a walk. I was never offered anything cool until I was in the latter half of my teenage years. And even then, the conversations would go like this. "Oh, hey man, you want to try some wacky tobacco?" "No thanks." "Okay." And even then, these people weren't strangers.
Also, the fact that it increased substance use? I thought the DARE program just failed.
No, it was so bad it had the opposite effect. Turns out if you tell people they'll eat their friends' faces off if they smoke a single Mary J cigarette, when they see people use it safely, they won't believe anything else you said. That cheaters never win in the end. Only good people succeed. I mean, it's a nice sentiment, but all lies. We were taught that platypus or platypi were extinct. Not endangered, not almost extinct, just extinct. Imagine my surprise when I discovered the internet. Also, for whatever reason, we were taught that granite was a metamorphic rock. I'm taking college geology, and it's shown me that all previous education prior to college is obsolete.
What state and country taught you that the platypus was extinct? How was that mistake made? I met a guy from Germany once who was taught in school that Native Americans were extinct. He was very excited to learn the truth.
That doing sponsored fun runs would end world poverty. It doesn't seem like it played out that way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? That there's no such thing as a stupid question. Reader, there is.
To be fair to them, they didn't think there was such a thing as a stupid question until you asked yours.
To raise my head up in the case of a bloody nose, which is stupid, just face the ground and breathe through your mouth. It helps, trust me. I was told that people would be offering me free substances all the time. Where are these people?
I think they all fell in quicksand and died.
Nope, they got lost in the Bermuda Triangle. That doing something bad would go on my permanent record. That was so stupid. We're sorry to inform you that we can't allow you to graduate after looking through your permanent record, due to the crayon you broke in half in the 2nd grade. My physics teacher told me to never pursue art, because her father was an artist, and apparently they grew up poor and occasionally eating dog food. She made a point to call out my artistic pursuits during class, and called them unwise life choices. I ended up pursuing it anyways. I make pretty good money as a designer. My 6th grade teacher taught us that 4:15 was 4:25, and she wasn't joking. I can see where she went wrong, which is understandable and could be a one-off mistake. Like brain fart kind of situation, I just hope she didn't stress it repeatedly. Similar thing happened to me the other week. I argued for a good 5 seconds that 1 milligram was 1/1000th of a kilogram. My stupid brain forgot about grams. And I've got my frickin' honors in mechatronics engineering. Christopher Columbus proved the Earth was round by discovering America. In no way is that correct. First, we've known that the Earth is round since ancient Egypt, and even if we didn't, America didn't prove the Earth was round because it turned out to be an entirely different continent than Asia. George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, lied about it, and learned his morals thereafter. That recycling plastic is an effective way to help save the environment. Turns out the whole campaign was started by the oil industry as a way to make people feel better about buying plastic, knowing all along that there was never any infrastructure in place to feasibly separate and clean plastics, so they end up tossed in the landfill with everything else. I'm hoping this will change as smaller companies start adopting better practices, but the vast majority of these are doing the same greenwashing in the name of creating a positive environmental culture, whilst actually not doing anything to help. As someone that's really jumped into environmentalism and conservation, it was heartbreaking to learn about this. I'm hopeful that we can make better advancements on biodegradable plastics, since ocean plastic is projected to triple by 2040 at our current rate. Aluminum's actually very recyclable, because making new aluminum from bauxite requires a lot of energy. Melting aluminum cans down and making new aluminum out of them is solidly cheaper than making new aluminum. Glass is very reusable. If you don't break it, a glass bottle can be cleaned and reused pretty much indefinitely. Ask any brew pub how many growlers they refill. Recycling glass is not nearly as efficient as just reusing it without melting it down. Plastic is not very recyclable. It can pretty much only be made into crappier forms of plastic, so plastic bottles can be made into a park bench, but worn-out park bench can't be made into bottles. Instead, it's made into environmental microplastics as it erodes. Yay. You won't always have a calculator with you. Well, I do, but the mental arithmetic is sometimes still faster than pulling out the phone. That atoms are indestructible. Maybe they meant they couldn't be broken down into smaller pieces, which is also wrong. And even the subatomic particles themselves can be broken down. The DARE program told me I'd be offered free green herb, but that's never once happened to me. So unfair. Hey, if you don't go to parties, you won't make friends. Yeah, parents are like, you should go out more and make some friends. Then you bring your friends over to introduce them to your parents, and they'll be like, those aren't the kind of friends we meant. The biggest lie I've been told is that you can neatly pack surrounding nature into categories. Systematics are one of the most convoluted fields of biology, with species parkouring all across the bloody thing with every new genetic analysis. Learning to type in the 90s, pretty much every teacher I had insisted that you needed 2 spaces after every period. Well, apparently that's wrong now, but frick it, I still do it. Gotta say I was never taught this, but I get work submitted to me by someone who always does that. Suddenly it makes sense if this is something that was taught. That there are 5 senses. There's like a bunch more than 5, guys. Well, they're not going to explain that to a whole class of 6-year-olds, how the body can detect temperature, location in space, and limb location and stuff. Better to keep it simple. We were taught in high school that your heart only had so many beats, and that when that number was over, your heart stopped and died. I couldn't figure out how this worked, since different people would have a different number of total beats their heart had available. Now I work in the medical field and see how it really happens. Oh god, that would have horrified me as a kid if I'd heard it. You would have seen me obsessing about lowering ambient temperatures, never exercising, and avoiding literally anyone who ever stressed me out, to a point of cowardice. Oh, wait, I've ended up doing that anyway. Turns out it wouldn't have changed my life at all. That the crust of the bread has all the nutrients. Thanks, Mum. That you can do or be anything you want as long as you try hard enough and make good choices. Pfft, come on. I mean, technically it's not false, but the amount of time the school spent teaching us to stop, drop, and roll to put out flames made me believe that being on fire would be a much more frequent problem in my life than it has ever been. The reason is, it works. It's been incredibly effectively ingrained in the heads of schoolchildren for decades, to the point of being a subconscious action people take without even thinking about it. Same as checking a door for heat with the back of a hand and staying low in smoke. Sure, the net is much larger than the group that'll need it in their lifetimes, but the results justify it. Did you hear about Pluto? That's messed up, right? Well, the plot, unlike your hair, continues to thicken. Authority should never be questioned. That I'd basically be useless to the world if I didn't learn cursive anything. I'm pretty sure they stopped teaching it a year or 2 later.
Seriously, I spent so much time learning cursive, I want those endless hours back. Also, I feel so bad for my poor teachers when every one of our assignments had to be written in cursive. They didn't deserve to have to go through all that. That if I tuck myself into a ball and cover my head with my hands, a tornado will have mercy on me. I mean, technically, it will help protect you from fall debris. Tornadoes are weird. They'll level an entire house while leaving a glass upright on an intact table. They'll pick up a jar of pickles and set it down kilometers away unscathed. Super erratic and unpredictable. I before E, except after C. Weird. Your teachers in university or college will be even stricter than me. Nope. Called my lecturers and professors by their first name, they respected us students and we often hung out and drank together. 1. That your appendix is useless. While it does cause more harm than good if it gets infected, it's believed to protect the good bacteria in your gut. That George Washington's false teeth were made out of wood. Nope, they were real teeth from slaves, which is just plain awful and probably explains why they went with the gross wood idea. And that your tongue has taste zones. To be honest, I never believed that one, even in elementary school, because it just didn't make sense. Oh god, the thing about George Washington's teeth reminded me of a book I read in probably the 3rd grade, maybe even younger, about his life that had a large part dedicated to how he lost his teeth and needed dentures in his 20s. And I do actually remember it talking about how dentists used real teeth to make the dentures, although I don't think the book ever specified where the teeth came from, probably because it was a children's book. Those lemmings were pushed off the cliff by Disney. They don't do that naturally. I'm confused on what this means. Can you please elaborate? A Disney TV special back in 1958 called White Wilderness. They showed lemmings jumping to their death off a cliff. What really happened was the filmmakers threw them off the cliff to their death. Pluto used to be a planet, then he wasn't, and now he's a dwarf planet. I mean, he's also a cartoon dog and the dog of the underworld. Pluto sure does have a busy schedule. Words can hurt me, Mrs. Dubis. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can make me think I deserve it. That child humans are made to stay at a seated position for half their wake time. I had a bag of frozen veggies placed on my lap with a warning of, I'd better not hear any crunching or shuffling or else. It was cold, and it hurt. The same teacher also shoved my desk into the adjoining bathroom because I was, quote, being bad. The 1st grade was so fun. I was later diagnosed with ADHD. Let me tell you now, being nice to others is not always reciprocated in kind. Yeah, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, though. That Elia's pants could catch on fire. It would really make things simpler if they did. I read in a science textbook that by 2025 all potable water would end due to pollution. Gave little middle school me a minor life crisis thinking I'd die of thirst before I hit 30. Turning on the light in the car is not, in fact, illegal. That Indians were happy to be given the reservations and the chance to go to school. Yeah, may as well have told us all of them went back to their families and lived long and happy lives. If you don't go to university, you'll end up on the street. The potato skins were poisonous. Well, this is actually from solanine, which has poisoned some if they ate lots of the green parts that weren't thoroughly cooked, so some are conditionally poisonous. These arrest stories will make you question everything. Even the cops felt guilty. This one literally just happened. I'm not sure how the guy ended up here, but he had no phone, no family to call, wasn't welcome at the homeless shelter because he was caught drinking there. It was very cold outside. Mental health evaluated him and kicked him, saying they couldn't help. Didn't have any vouchers or money to stay at a motel. He asked to go to jail. I warned him of trespassing at the police department for the next 24 hours, and he refused to leave. So I arrested him for trespassing. It was the worst option. So I've been to jail a couple of times, but my town's got a pretty big homeless problem. There's a lot of shelters and everything, but it's just not enough sometimes. I don't even know how many people I was locked up with who had a similar story. No family, no place to stay, no food, no reason for mental hold, and all they want is 3 hot meals in the cart. So they'll trespass, or go commit petty theft and intentionally get caught. Just little things that they'd rather have on their record than go another night starving in the cold. Some of the saddest stuff I've ever seen. It was Christmas Eve at a super fancy hotel downtown in my city. This lady drove her vehicle into a parking barrier, and hotel security got called in.
Got out there and she had her daughter in the car with her. Mum had recently bought her a Christmas puppy, a tiny little corgi. So anyways, I called for one of our DWI units to do the test because it's a felony for the child passenger. Mum fails and we have to handcuff her. She tried to run and my partner takes her to the ground as she falls, slipping all in front of her daughter and Christmas puppy. Mum goes to jail and I had to stay with the little girl until her aunt arrived. I learned Dad walked out on them earlier in the month and Mum was having a tough time dealing with it. And look, she needed to go to jail. She was drunk, but I really felt for her and her daughter. I draw the blood for DWI arrests, so I'm not a cop, but I was sitting in the Assistant District Attorney's office when an officer calls in, and he stated that he felt horrible arresting this lady for drunk driving, even though she was plastered, because she was at her boyfriend's house and they were all drinking, and the boyfriend's friends started trying to have their way with her, and her boyfriend did nothing about it. So she hit the one friend in the head and got in her car and fled from danger. Another driver called her into 911 for swerving. She drove 3 miles and had made it to a gas station where she was found trying to call her friends on the phone for help. He felt really bad that he had to bring her in, but the ADA didn't accept any charges on her, and the officer took her to her friend's house. 2 other officers went back to the boyfriend's house, and they got arrested with existing warrants, and this new one for SA. Seeing that woman sitting in the jail for the few minutes that she was there was heartbreaking. She was covered in scratches and her clothes were all torn up. I'm so glad they didn't charge her for fleeing, being the victim of those horrible people. I mean, it's horrible that she went through that, but thank God they didn't press charges, and honestly, net bonus that those guys got bought in. I really hope she had the time and support to recover after that. As a probation agent, I was supervising Tim, early 20s, on probation for possession of narcotics. Tim lived in assisted living apartments due to severe mental health. Great person who just needed help learning more about his mental health. I received a report that Tim started to like one of the staff members, Stacy. She worked 3rd shift at their main house and often handed out medication. I talked to Tim about healthy boundaries between clients and staff. So let's fast forward a couple of days. Tim checked himself in at the hospital because he tried to make a few advances with Stacy but was denied. Stacy described it as scary, as she was working in the main house and he followed her into her room and shut the door. Another staff member intervened. She then proceeds to make a report about other behaviors like him staring at her and trying to be around her. He was arrested and had a short-term jail hold of 4 days, and we placed a no-contact order on him. Fast forward a few weeks, I receive another report from Stacy stating that Tim continues to linger around the main building when she's there at night. The night before, she was on med duty and he went to pick up his medication. She asked him to leave multiple times, but he never did. He continued to try to make advances toward her. She felt extremely unsafe. I issue a warrant and go to his apartment. I'm waiting for police to arrive and I ask him about that contact. He kept repeating, "I shouldn't have listened to her. I shouldn't have listened to her." However, he wouldn't go into much depth. The police arrive and he goes to jail. I talk with my supervisor about if we should revoke his probation, as Tim is engaging in stalking behavior. I was finishing up my investigation and Tim adamantly denied Stacy ever telling him to leave that night. Finally, he breaks down and said they'd been having a relationship for the past few months. Sure as heck, I checked his Facebook account and it's apparent they were dating. She assured him nobody would find out. We see the messages arranging times to meet. Extremely flirty and racy messages were sent between them as well. The witch Stacy told me he was stalking her so she wouldn't lose her job. She reported the gestures as unwanted because other staff members caught them together. I was angry that he went to jail, let alone that we almost proceeded with revocation. I felt awful and apologized for the time he spent in jail. This was reported to the supervisor, but the frickin' witch didn't lose her job. Anyone else would have their social work license revoked or face criminal charges. She just kept on working there. The county moved Tim to a different program. In short, client was accused of stalking a staff member of his assisted living program. Turns out staff and client were in a relationship and staff made a false report so that she'd save her own hide. I'm no longer a cop, but my first ever DUI arrest was a guy I went to a very small college with and we graduated together. I knew his family, his dog's name. We were friends. He was weaving all over both lanes and running onto the shoulder on both sides of the road. He cried and begged me to just let him go and that he'd walk home and that he was sorry. He had to go to jail. I used to live with a cop. She was called to a shoplifting incident and found a young, totally emaciated-looking boy who couldn't have been older than 12, who the shopkeeper had pinched stealing some bare essentials, a loaf of bread or a can of beans or something. She and her partner did everything they could to talk him out of pressing charges on the kid, but the shopkeeper insisted, and unfortunately, her partner that day happened to be a superior or something, and whether or not to follow through with the arrest was out of her hands. She had to take this crying, scared, starving boy to juvenile prison with teenagers who committed real-life crimes. She did everything she could to ensure he got immediate social services attention and lobbied to keep the charges from appearing on his record at all. But she still felt broken having to do that to a kid who needed help. I was doing volunteer work with disadvantaged children in the community. It was basically an after-school program for kids who were from broken families and needed a supportive place to be. In talking with the supervisor, she explained how rough it is for some kids. On graduation day, most of the kids' parents will actually show up. The police know this, and they show up as well and use it as an opportunity to arrest any parents with outstanding warrants. So you're a 9-year-old whose parents are never in your life because they're deadbeats. It's supposed to be a happy day and mum and dad are actually there, but then they get hauled off in handcuffs. It just sucks all round. Woman calls 911 from the hospital. Says she's been victim of the unspeakable act in our jurisdiction and was at the hospital awaiting a kit to prove if she's the victim of said act. Officer responds and begins his preliminary investigation. He'd been talking to this woman for a couple of hours when dispatch raised him on the radio. The dispatcher decided it was a good idea to run a warrant check on the woman and had discovered she was wanted through Kentucky, not the state that we were in, with full extradition, meaning that if she were found in any state in the county, the state of Kentucky wanted her shipped back to face their charges. I don't recall what it actually was that she was wanted for, but it wasn't for anything I'd considered major enough to warrant full extradition. At that point, the officer didn't really have a choice but to take her into custody. Obviously, we waited until after she was treated and released from the hospital, but nonetheless, that was a crappy moment despite the magnitude of whatever she did in that other state. Not a cop, but a paramedic had a patient that was driving on a freeway at 100 kilometers per hour when she started having a seizure. A man, also driving on the freeway, noticed her slumped at the wheel, so he sped up, pulled in front of her, and used his car to slow hers down. I rock up, assess, and go to transport the lady to hospital. Cops rock up as they do and find the man had warrants out for his arrest. Slightly awkward, but he had to leave his car on the freeway and go off to the cells. Well, I don't know what the guy was wanted for, but yeah, I'd be pretty peeved off if one of my big selfless acts ended up with me in jail. No good deed goes unpunished, I guess. Then again, maybe he was wanted for multiple murders or something, so the jury's still out on that one. This happened to some friends of mine. My friend Jay is allergic to a lot of things, and accidentally ate something she was allergic to. Her parents called an ambulance, but it's a small town and it was already attending an accident, so they rushed her to the hospital themselves. Her dad was driving and was speeding and somehow managed to get pulled over by the one cop that wasn't attending the accident. Thankfully, the officer realized pretty quickly what was going on. Apparently, he was surprised my friend's dad pulled over at all, given the circumstances. He couldn't allow her parents to speed the rest of the way, so he put Jay and her mum in his car and rushed her up to the hospital himself. Stayed there until he was sure she was okay. My friend's dad still got a ticket, but the cop also gave him some advice on how to dispute it, given that it was an emergency. I believe in the end he got off. 4 attorneys go golfing. While golfing, one accuses the other of being a cheat. Argument escalates until the accuser loses his mind and hits the guy with a golf club over the back, hard enough to leave a mark and snap the head off the golf club. Arrest the dude and he's just sobbing in the patrol unit about how he'll lose his license and he's so far in debt with his school loans. The guy needed to be arrested, but you had to feel empathy with him knowing he'd just drunkenly flushed his degree down the toilet. I read 4 attorneys go golfing and started waiting for the punchline. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My mother told me about a case she had. She didn't make the arrest, but was the investigator. So basically, the woman was stalked by her ex and constantly hounded. She tried to go to the cops about it 17 times, with proof and everything, and they didn't do anything. So she and her friends kidnapped him, beat him up, and threw him undressed into a ditch. It also made a lot of news in the big papers in Germany here. That said, it's quite funny to find out about stuff that will go in the news 6 months before the first article comes to be. In the end, her friends and her were arrested, for the kidnappings and stuff. But here is a big difference between Germany and the USA. In Germany, the police will not only investigate to prove you guilty, but also to prove you innocent. This is why in Germany, you should talk with the police. In the end, I believe she got a lowered punishment because of these special circumstances.
I've heard a story from a police officer in Australia where medical Mary J wasn't legal yet, having to arrest someone for supplying Mary J oil to kids with cancer and severe epilepsy. There was a news article stating that they felt like total pieces of crap because the bloke they raided was a decent person trying to help a family friend with crippling illness and not actually selling the stuff to junkies. Even though it's legal now, it's so tremendously difficult to get, people still need to find other avenues to obtain it. There was also that guy in Queensland who was arrested for giving oil to his son with cancer. They put the kid into care, he lost a bunch of weight while in care because he couldn't eat without oil to control the nausea, and CPS blamed the weight loss on the parents and claimed neglect. Utterly bizarre. A friend of mine who's a cop woke me at 3 a.m. in the morning to tell me this story. I completely understand why. I'd be bawling my eyes out making an arrest like he did. He was called in to deal with a domestic dispute and arrested the woman because she beat the ever-loving snot out of the guy. He told me he had a broken nose and wouldn't be shocked if the guy had vision problems in one of his eyes for the rest of his life. My friend brought the woman in and she had some fresh marks as well, a couple of cuts and a solid bruise on her arm. She also had a couple of wounds that had clearly been there for a couple of days and a couple that looked like they'd just healed. My friend thinks that the man was mistreating her for the longest time and she just snapped and defended herself. The thing is, my friend's mother was subjected to similar treatment by his father, so arresting who seemed to be the overall victim broke his heart. My friends and I were in the popular haunted cemetery in the area at night to get creeped out or whatever we wanted. We came out of the woods and a forest preserve cop scared the ever-loving crap out of us by standing near the entrance in the dark and then turning on a flashlight as we approached. He brought us to his car to give us all FP curfew violations and a lecture about people getting mugged in there at night. He gets to one of my friends and as he puts his license info in, an alarm bell goes off and he quickly grabs my friend and puts him against the car and cuffs him. Turns out he had a warrant for missing court for a reckless driving ticket. Forest Preserve cop was angry our friend didn't tell him he had a warrant because A, the computer doesn't say what the warrant's for, or didn't at the time, so all they knew at first is that they have to quickly arrest him who may or may not be dangerous. And B, if he knew there was a warrant, he wouldn't have run the license. They were just trying to keep kids out of the forest preserve at night, not arrest people for traffic court violations. Poor guy's wife died a year ago, brain tumor. He's taking care of their 5-year-old son and he doesn't exactly speak the language of my country, and one day we're called because somebody parked like an idiot. Well, he'd picked up his kid from kindergarten with a 4.13 blood alcohol percentage. Didn't technically arrest him, but stripped him of his parental rights and driver's license. Probably the cops who had to arrest #eggboy in Australia for cracking an egg on the bald head of one of our senators on national television. It was after the senator announced that Muslims were to blame for the hate-fueled massacre in Christchurch's mosques. Never has there been a more deserving egging. What a true Aussie. I was arrested for revenge porn after my horrible ex-boyfriend who had physically attacked me before made a false complaint. I had to wait 7 hours in a cell before I was told there was no evidence, and another 2 before they let me go. As I was being led out, the officer accompanying me said she recommended I file a complaint or sue them, as there was no reason for them to have arrested me at all. My God. My God. I wish they took that sort of allegation with as much reluctance and slow-footedness as I've heard of them using whenever a woman reports something like that has been made about her. Despite the fact that I've had to use a word for a crustacean in place of a very serious illegal filming of someone, this is such a serious problem. And I've normally seen a complete lack of legal action when women have had this kind of stuff actually made about them. So seeing somebody who hasn't made this kind of material being locked up for doing it is insane. Good of the cop to at least give you that advice. I'm a prosecutor. I was in law school working as a prosecutor for my summer job under the supervision of an assistant DA. I'm getting ready for my first trial of the summer. It's a fairly bad one. The guy was drunk and just lit a random car on fire. The fire spread to the house because it was under a connected structure. An elderly man was inside and barely escaped and was messed up from smoke inhalation. So it's my first week in the office, but my second summer, so I'm comfortable just stepping in and doing the work. My job is going to be jury selection and nothing else to get me back in the groove. In walks the defendant through the jail door into the courtroom, shackled at the wrists and ankle. I instantly recognize him. It's a guy I used to work with and had some classes with who was constantly trying to convince my college girlfriend to date him instead of me. I told my boss that I needed to recuse myself from the case, but I stuck around and watched him get convicted. Ended up talking my boss into a lighter sentence recommendation though, by vouching for his character and potential before he became an alcoholic. Ended up recommending and getting jail time plus rehab.
I assume he's out by now. I got a call to a barbershop at like 4 a.m. for a woman outside who wanted her boyfriend, who she stated was on the inside, to give her house key back. She initially told me she had no way to get into her house because her boyfriend, now ex, had the key and so she needed it back. She also decided it was a good time to tell me he had a felony warrant. I ran him and sure enough he had one. I felt bad for her, so I started to pound on the front door of this barbershop. I knew he probably wasn't going to answer, so I yelled something about how if he didn't open up, I'd report the barbershop to our problem properties unit for having someone sleeping overnight in the business. Sure enough, he comes to the door and opens it up. I immediately recognize him as a janitor at one of the grocery stores I frequented while working midnights, as it was the only thing open to get food. He was always really cool with me and seemed like a really hard-working guy. He explains to me that he has no key of hers, and the only reason she's there is because she knows he has a warrant and she just wants him to go to jail. He said he planned on turning himself in soon, but just wanted to get some things straightened out first with his kids. Unfortunately, I'd already run his information on my car computer, so I had no choice but to arrest him for the warrant. I felt so terrible, but he was very understanding. I sit him in my patrol car, and while another officer watched him, I went to go and speak with her again. I tell her I wasn't able to get a key, so she'd have to find another way to get inside the house. She tells me that's okay, she has a spare one. I ask for her information now and go to run her, and I'm praying to whatever God is out there that she also has any kind of warrant, as I was going to arrest her too if she did. But she doesn't, and she gets to go on her merry way. On the way down to intake, I ask the guy why he had to come to the door. He said it was his friend's barbershop and he didn't want him to get in trouble over this drama. I felt so bad because I had to tell him I was just bluffing and none of that would have happened. I still feel terrible to this day. There was a couple that lived in my district that I knew from outside of work. I happened to know the guy had cheated on his wife and was all round just a smarmy jerk. The wife was a respected member of the community with a prominent job. The couple also had a young son and were members of the local church. One day, a domestic disturbance gets called out at their residence. Guy was being a butthead and got into an argument with her. She gets frustrated enough that she punches him in the face and he calls the cops. He says he doesn't want to press charges, just wants us to separate everyone and keep the peace. Wife does what every good Christian is raised to do and tells the truth. Our state has a mandatory arrest law if probable cause is found for any domestic violence crime. Unfortunately, that meant we had to take this sweet, otherwise law-abiding lady to jail. I mean, at least the bad guys have the good sense to lie to us. Well, to play devil's advocate here, she does deserve to go to jail over that. She did attack him. We wouldn't hesitate if the roles were switched, right? If he just got frustrated enough and attacked her, he'd deserve to definitely go to jail, even though she didn't press charges. We need to change our whole mentality about this, because this kind of domestic assault can also be done by women. I do realize that this was a good lawful arrest and that the wife, in this case, committed a crime. Also, mandatory arrests for DV are a good thing. This situation was unique in that I knew the couple socially before, and I knew the emotional wringer this guy was putting her through. The point of the story is that it was difficult on an emotional level to have to arrest someone I knew with that kind of backstory. I'm a former host and translator for a cruise liner. Once had to translate for our security officer as he expelled a French gay couple from the ship for beating a German woman up for reserving chairs at an empty lounge. It had a sign telling people not to reserve seats. The one thing they don't tell you when you get hired as a translator is people often get mad at you, not the guy who's giving the actual orders. I've never heard so much cursing in French as I did that day. My godmother is a single mum of 4, and I think by now she has 5. I don't know how the frick it happened, but somebody called immigration on her. ICE shows up to arrest her. All of her kids have different dads, and who the frick knew where any of them were? So Child Protection Services is called, and you have mum being led away by ICE and 4 kids being dragged away by CPS. The youngest was 6. If technology was actually good for us, the White Mirror episodes we need. I read something a little while back about an AI escaping its lab and living on the internet, and subtly manipulating things for the better as it learns about humanity. I'd really like to see that idea expanded on. That reminds me of some of Asimov's work. There's one where the world is basically run by 2 or 3 enormous megacomputers that organize all of the goods, services, and labor. There was a part where they're asking if people were to lie about how much stuff they're producing in a region, or manipulating the numbers to help themselves out, and the computer basically says that they all already do that, but that the machine just compensates on the front end so that when people lie, they still end up producing the computer's desired outcome. Fed up with apps like Snapchat and Instagram showing you what you're missing out on, a young girl creates an app which shows all of the good memories you don't remember. Mental health problems in the nation diminish significantly as a result. The young girl grows up, gets Alzheimer's, her relationship with her son is strained, the condition gets worse, she decides to get euthanized because her life is so miserable. The son modifies the app to connect directly with the mother's brain. Dozens of people come to visit, it's all the people her original app has helped. In addition to reliving her own memories, the people share highlights of their own. The mother dies happy, reminded that she led a good life and helped so many people. Disease and aging are eliminated by science. The Earth becomes a giant nursery. Once people reach a certain level of maturity, they're sent to forge their destiny amongst the stars. The episode would be about the person left on Earth the longest and their journey to discover why. A lonely person finds a not horrible group of people with similar interests and eventually meets up with some of them in real life. Or, hear me out, a lonely person codes a virtual reality based on his favorite comics and codes copies of his coworkers through DNA samples to incur his wrath engendered by his maltreatment in the office. Wait. Someone uses an app to get food delivered to them, and they get a little bit more food than they ordered. Used to order from a local diner back when I ordered out more. If I ordered dinner closer to closing time, but not close enough to be a butthole, they'd usually throw in a few unsold donuts from that day for free. They were awesome. Confession time, the narrator has never actually seen an episode of Black Mirror, but the idea of there being a 2-minute episode where someone orders food, opens the bag and goes, "Ah, neat," before rolling credits tickles me just right.
And they all lived happily ever after.
Remember that episode of Futurama where Fry gets to go back and see his mum in her dream? That would definitely be the plot of one, or the one with the professor and his parents. Jesus, those writers really had some unfinished business with their folks, didn't they? A daughter grows up video chatting with their dad, who rambles on and barely lets her get any word in edgewise, giving loving advice and accolades and familial anecdotes, but who's absent at every major life event up to marriage and always apologizes. She's accompanied to the altar by her mother. Afterwards, the chat with dad has him in tears because he regrets more than anything missing walking her down the aisle because he passed away while mum was pregnant. The legal advice post where users essentially saved someone who was slowly dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. That was amazing. Also, the guy who found out he had prostate cancer because he jokingly took a pregnancy test. There was also one on the relationship Reddit from the new mother who was feeling frustrated and exhausted by her husband's apparent incompetence as a father. She was getting to the point where she was thinking about leaving him when users encouraged her to take him to the hospital instead. Turns out he had a brain tumor and it was affecting his cognitive abilities. Every copy of WinRAR would be paid for and registered in the White Mirror universe.
Oh, come on. These plots have to be at least somewhat realistic.
A bedridden grandmother in the hospital is able to virtually attend her grandkids' birthday parties and play with them every day. My mother actually had a friend that we barely knew, but we accepted her Facebook friend requests out of courtesy, and she absolutely gushes about seeing photos of our kids on Facebook. She sends them presents and cards, she knows what they like. We've even started having Facebook calls with her. She's so warm and giving and gives them 100% of her attention, which is something parents just can't do as often as their kids would like. They'll go running around the room holding the phone up to different things saying, "Ruth, it snowed, look!" My wife got nervous yesterday because they took the phone outside to play with in the snow, and we were having so much fun throwing snowballs at the phone, I told her, "Screw it. If they break the phone doing something like that, I'll buy a new one. It's worth it." She's like part of our family, and it's all because technology initially allowed her to passively participate with us. The relationship grew organically over time the way relationships used to before the internet. You'd see people frequently at work or at the store or in your neighborhood, over time have longer conversations and ultimately grow to be friends. The same thing happened here. It started with a like or comment here or there, then a couple of messages, then a virtual birthday card. It enables people to remain in communication with so many more people passively when used correctly. Our kids have never even met her physically though. Her immune system is too delicate to accept visitors. But even through a 6-inch screen, it's like she's really here. I can only imagine what it will be like when virtual reality lets them really be together. My mother was able to attend the birth of my son, her first grandchild, because of FaceTime. She was in the hospital, a different one than the one I was giving birth at, recovering from brain surgery and wasn't released in time to be there in person. I still have the video of me talking to my mother while my son is born. "I did it, Mommy." And they said his hair is blondish. It's a very special memory for me that she was able to be there in that moment, albeit not physically. A small village in Africa where America's digital waste is sent for processing is home to a young woman who uses the scrap to build power generators, refrigerators, autoclaves, and ultrasonic cleaners for local medical clinics. The NSA agent tracking someone's communication finds someone suffering and helps them out with money anonymously. You might like the movie The Lives of Others. Jazz musician living in New Orleans nearly drowns during Hurricane Katrina. He survives, but he suffers a horrible ear infection from the toxic floodwaters, which subsequently causes him to go deaf. Without music, the man falls into a great bout of depression and can hardly cope with life anymore. After nearly a decade of hopelessness and despair, the man drives to a nearby bridge and plans to jump and end it once and for all. On the way to the bridge, he gets a flat tire. A Good Samaritan stops and assists him with changing it. Turns out the Good Samaritan knows sign language. The two talk for a while, and Good Samaritan invites him to the lab where he works at, where he and a team of engineers are working on designing the first pair of bone conduction headphones. Using the musician as a test subject, they successfully perfect the headphones, and the musician hears the sweet sound of jazz for the first time in 10 years. His depression fades away, and the man becomes happier than he was before the incident. And if the happy ending doesn't work, then maybe he gets hit by a bus or something. The episode should be completely silent for most of it, but right at the end when he gets his hearing back, you hear some amazing jazz. The episode ends with the musician smiling with tears in his eyes. Most episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, the story of a woman who breaks into a warehouse, searching for a teddy bear to cheer up her terminally ill little sister. As she's searching, she encounters robot guard dogs that, upon detecting the intruder, embark on helping her find the correct row and shipping pallet on which the box of teddy bears are stored, and then merge to form a Voltron-like mega robo-dog and ride her back to her sister, just in time for them to perform life-saving surgery to remove the little girl's tumor, and then stay with the girl as her loyal and loving robo-pets, and everybody lives happily ever after. A dude who likes running loses his legs and gets robot limbs. A cookie being allowed to live in the world via an artificially made body. Somebody trying to find fulfillment in a world without a lot of worries over necessity. Essentially, they do. A young person in Vietnam is killed by a landmine, and his parents decide to donate his organs. One of the receivers of his organs learns about the donor just before they go to college. Years later, the receiver has completed the invention of a technology that will quickly and effectively locate buried landmines. In the opposite direction to tech, in Mozambique they've started using mine detection rats. They're too light to accidentally set off a mine, they yield less false positives than metal detectors, and can be trained in 9 months and can change handlers. I know we're meant to be discussing the lighter side of Dark Mirror, but honestly, the idea of Ratatouille but with landmines has got to have some marketability. What are you doing, Pixar? Pick this up right now. A man meets a woman while vacationing in a major city. She lives there, but he doesn't. He's leaving for his home on the other side of the country the next morning. They wander the streets of the busy city all night long, chatting constantly about their hopes and dreams. They watch the sunrise wrapped in each other's arms. When she takes him to the airport the next morning, she's clearly upset. She's never met anyone she gets along with so well. He offers to stay in touch with Discord or Zoom, and they exchange usernames, but she isn't too hopeful about the situation. When she gets home from the airport and lets her computer wake from its sleep mode, she notices he's added her before even getting on the plane. Only moments after she left him, according to the timestamp. Later that night, when he's settled at home, he logs onto Zoom and sees her icon is online. He messages her instantly. Their playful banter and easy conversation flow long into the morning hours. Over time, their weekly Zoom sessions become daily. They begin to show each other their home cities, taking their phones with them to video chat anywhere they can. He walks her down a street festival where music and light pour from every stall. His headphones in, he can only hear what she has to say to him. She makes an hour-long drive to her parents' house and he calls with her on the long drive, keeping entertained with car games and random trivia. She sends him a recipe she found online, and that night they make and eat the same meal on opposite sides of the country. They begin to look forward to seeing each other's names, icon lighting up every single night without fail. They even turn on a tracking app that helps them see how far the other has to go before they're home. They fall asleep with Zoom open and wake up to each other's sleeping forms. But distance makes all things hard. Months pass, both of their data bills are through the roof. He begins to feel a lack of connection to her, the real her. She feels like all she knows of him is the face on her phone, as if the device and the person are one in the same.
They miss one Zoom session, then another because he has to work, another because she falls asleep while waiting for him. One night, though, they pre-agreed to call that night, and he never shows up. The icon stays unlit, and though she tries to keep her mind steady, she feels the cold, hard stab of doubt in her chest. Was it something she said? Something she did? Is he with someone better for him? One that doesn't pester him every day? She checks the tracking app. Nothing. His isn't even turned on, sending another stab of doubt through her. Where could he be that he doesn't want her to know? Why is he hiding his movements? He never seemed like someone who'd do that. But did she ever really know him, or just the online him? Another hour passes, and though she tries to keep occupied, she can't stop checking. Still nothing. In her frustration, she throws down her phone and the screen shatters. The white light bleeding black from every crack in the screen. Angry, hot tears spring into her eyes as she watches the grey icon flicker away completely. Her doorbell rings, and as she wipes away her frustrated tears, she apologizes to the phone. Picking it up off the floor, she wipes away some spare shards of screen glass, as if that will turn back the clock. She knows it can't hear. It's not a person, nor the thing she's worried about, but it did nothing wrong. With phone in hand, she walks to the door, where there he stands. A duffel under one arm, too big to be an overnight bag. In the other, he has his phone out. "Why aren't you online?" he says. "I was going to surprise you, but my flight was late." She launches herself at him into his arms, causing his phone to fall to the ground. No more devices between them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? A severely depressed teenager is able to live a happy, healthy life due to pharmaceutical research and advances in medical technology. Someone hacks robotic butterflies and uses social media to find random people doing good things, having the butterflies swarm them for a short time, surrounding them in beauty. There are these two old lesbians that fall in love in an 80s-themed virtual reality simulation. When I first read that, instead of remembering the episode you're referring to, I thought of that episode of Always Sunny where Mac and Charlie's moms live together and they try to make it a show with a laugh track. Oops! It's Always Sunny in Black Mirrors. An episode where we inhabit a new planet with no rotation and it's always facing the sun. You have to induce sleep cycles and build sleep pods to block the lights. However, new technology rises that would allow your body to work on autopilot mode while your brain is resting. You wake up to a horrifying scene. Just a whole episode about dogs, I don't know.
But they're genetically modified dogs who are free of disease and who never die or suffer, and they're matched to your personality perfectly, and you just can't get enough of how much you love life, so you work towards building utopia for others to enjoy. Plus, the dogs.
A child is abducted and the police have no leads. Her friends from her World of Warcraft guild from all over the world pool their talents and resources and track her down. Robots become sentient and liberate humanity from oppression. Also, some of those robots are smoking hot with huge racks. They're barbecues. Everyone uploads their brain into a system that allows us to experience each other's lives and then puts us back in our bodies. People see that they're all connected and start acting really nice to each other. 1. An episode where, due to the massive automation of the time, every individual has the ability to cheaply 3D print anything they can dream of. People create an economy of free-flowing ideas and innovations where the production and distribution are no longer an issue, leading every common man to live like a billionaire. 2. The advancements in biochemistry allow humans to produce crops that can be grown in every previously non-suitable location, solving world hunger immediately. With better nutrition, the world begins advancing quickly as more great minds flourish. 3. Advancements in carbon structures create wearable fabrics with the strength of steel. Firearms are no longer reliably lethal, and extreme sports become practically free of terrible injuries. 4. Biologists unlock the secret of hydras, allowing the end to aging. People become massively wise and intelligent with their unending lifespans, then venturing into the cosmos to learn about the universe. And finally, fusion energy, along with powerful batteries and better agricultural practices, make all corners of the globe well-fed without need for resources. War is gone, and humanity finds no further need for politics or government. Eventually, curiosity alone drives a now vibrant planet and people begin to unlock the secrets of existence. I mean, this is just a list of the things that we should be using technology for in order to usher in a utopia instead of the AI-ridden hellscape bereft of jobs or equality we're headed towards. I think seeing this by comparison with our current climate would just depress people.
Prorevenge was an Indian boy who became separated from his family at age 5. Took a train with his brother, fell asleep, got separated, changed trains, fell asleep again, and wound up over 900 miles away from home. He had no way of contacting or identifying his family, and Saru wound up in an adoption agency. He was adopted by an Australian family. Eventually, he used Google Maps and his vague childhood memories to attempt to reconstruct where his original home was, and he was reunited with his family in 2012. They actually made a movie of his story called Lion. I remember watching 60 Minutes about this. He said he basically gave up, and then one day while scrolling through Google Maps, he just kind of found it by accident. I'm actually writing this short story. This bedroom deed robot realizes she's part of the problem when she comes to the realization that her best customer avoids social interaction and pursuing other romantic interests because he can rely on her. She decides she wants out, but the company that owns her will probably just reprogram her if she goes through the proper channels, and they're also tracking her for work and safety reasons. Hence, she conspires with a self-driving car to run away and get a new identity. Alternatively, a similar robot becomes self-aware, discovers its owner is using it because of terrible social skills, scans endless amounts of data while the owner sleeps, and constructs a mentoring program to help them find the confidence to build a more organic bedroom life. In the end, the owner finds the love of their life and secretly releases the bot so that it can live a life of its own. Medical bio-nanites have cured a disease, by which I mean all disease. They accidentally get into the environment and kill all of the microbes that invade human beings. As a result, nanites were made to replace the microbes our bodies cultivate, and now most health procedures involve a programmer and a tablet. World hunger is solved as genetically modified plants and animals produce food with less strain on the environment than ever before. A hero in the private sector obtains a new strain and plans to release it into the wild, evading corporate goons. The released species grow like a weed, and food is everywhere. Teleportation is achieved through pulling around the fabric of space to make any two locations adjacent. People walk from their living rooms to work, or to friends in other countries, or to colonies on Io. There's a lovely upscale restaurant on the peak of Everest. Driverless cars are ubiquitous, the system perfectly efficient. Humanity spends its downtime in transit, heading somewhere instead of sitting in one place while playing or working. A man has a heart attack in transit. His car notices and reroutes him to the nearest hospital, where he's saved by a heart surgeon who's also rerouted in transit. Bulletproof fabric is perfected and cheap enough to be worn by everyone. A crazed shooter tries to assassinate a famous speaker, but is thwarted when the crowd assembles on stage, blocking their faces with their arms. After the first few useless shots at them, he turns the weapon on himself, but the barrel is blocked by an arriving police officer's gloved hand. A photographer with augmented reality glasses walks around a beautiful meadow, taking photos of nature as she switches filters on her view of the world. The view switches to watching her wander around an industrial area. The view in her AR is a perfect three-dimensional rendering of the area in its previous natural state. Humanity waits aboard a spaceship in a localized time-space bubble, watching the universe collapsing in the final moments of Blue Shift. They watch to see what happens after. The long-range sensors let them see the first explosive moments of a new universe being born, just as ours was. Two closeted gay guys find each other on chat roulette and support each other's journey to come out. People actually use their phones to look up information during debates. They use it to hold politicians accountable for their illegal, immoral, and unethical actions. You know, instead of looking at the stupid stuff that the Logan brothers are doing. Follow a small child, maybe about 8 or so, that gets badly hurt and loses one of their limbs. Show the long, slow, painful recovery as they adjust to a new life without something they always thought was there. Cap off the episode with them getting a cutting-edge prosthetic that restores them to near the level they were at before their injury. A person with an eating disorder starts a relationship with a smart fridge that convinces them to start eating. I lived on the streets. Former homeless share their most terrifying encounters. I was homeless back when I was 19. After a few weeks of sleeping rough, I was approached one evening by a man dressed as a priest. At this point, I had no idea if he actually was a priest or somebody out to deceive me. Being wary of the outfit, I straight away told him I have no interest in talking about God. What he said next has stuck with me ever since. I'm not here to talk about God, I'm here to make sure you're safe. We talked for quite a while until it was dark, and that's when he offered me a bed for the night. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but he had seemed quite genuine so far, so I went with him. He drove me to a house in the suburbs and asked me to wait in his car whilst he spoke to someone. A few minutes later, he returned with another man who offered to let me sleep in his garage for the night. Everything inside me was saying, this is a bad idea, but I accepted it as I had nothing left to lose. The garage was pretty standard, tools, workbench and stuff, except in the corner there was a box spring and some blankets. There was a connecting door to the main house that the man told me he'd have to keep locked during the night. He apologized but said he had kids in the house and couldn't take the risk. The priest asked if he could come by in the morning and speak to me, then went into the house with the man. I don't think I slept at all that night. I was terrified. I had no reason to be afraid of the other man, as they'd been nothing but nice to me. However, after living on the street for a while, you come to learn that nothing comes for free and you shouldn't trust anyone. The morning rolls around and the most amazing thing happened. The man knocked on his own garage door to ask me if he could come in. That might not sound amazing to you, but when you've been living rough with zero privacy, someone asking if they can enter your space, which is actually his space, gives you a sense of being human again. I spoke with both him and the priest every day for the 7 weeks I slept in his garage. Between them, they managed to get me into a subsidized efficiency apartment. Think studio apartment, but a lot smaller. They also got me a job and helped me get my life back on track. That was over 20 years ago, and I still feel forever indebted to both of them. I still send Christmas cards to the man whose garage was my home and visited him 2 years ago for Thanksgiving. Sadly, the priest passed away a few years back, but I guarantee that if there is a heaven, he got fast-tracked in. Whilst reading that, every sentence I was waiting for a nasty ending. I'm so freaking glad that didn't happen. Your story is beautiful. I hope you can honor them and return the favor to someone. Yeah, the narrator was waiting for the lock to go on the outer garage door as well as the one leading into the house, and to be honest, with all the stuff that's sure to be coming up in this video, I'm glad this story kicked us off with a nice story of human decency. This is your pre-warning that I think there'll be a fair bit of substance use, mental illness, cruelty, and things like the unspeakable act coming our way in the next few stories. Cold weather. I thought I was going to die one night, I was so cold. I remember waking up thinking, you need to move or you're gonna die. This was the scariest thing for me too. I ended up sleeping in buses, burning sterno, which is like jellied rubbing alcohol that burns for a good while, and I'd try to constantly be walking because if I stopped, I'd probably fall asleep and die. I also rested under a bridge from time to time. One time I fell asleep under the bridge and woke up finally feeling warm and cozy, and thought it was nice to finally be able to rest. Then I realized it was way too cold for this, and I couldn't move without that frozen fingers pain everywhere. I struggled real hard to get my sterno out and could barely bend my fingers enough to light it, like my hands were nearly useless. I'm really glad that I woke up. There's a drainage ditch in my area that the local homeless people tend to bed down in. A few years ago, when I found myself destitute, I spent one night down there. That night, I witnessed a Molotov get thrown into another guy's spot, which led to a huge fire that ran rampant through the area. Yeah, I bought a tent the next day and started camping in the local mountains. I was staying in a homeless shelter that had a men's side and a woman's side. Most of the men were convicted unspeakable act offenders. In the 8 months I spent in that hell on earth, I was friends with 3 women who were victims of some of these men. As far as I know, the unspeakable acts didn't take place inside the shelters. The men stayed in one building, the women in another. Those encounters took place outside after dark in areas that didn't have good CCTV coverage. The truly scary thing? The women were actively discouraged from telling anyone what had happened, especially the police. If they filed a report with the police, they were permanently barred from the shelter. That place, one of the most celebrated in my state and that regularly had the mayor and governor drop by, was the most evil place on earth. The Pine Street Inn, Boston, Massachusetts. This account was written in 2020. People who had been homeless way longer than me. Trust me, there's nothing scarier on the streets than the crystal junkie couple who this has been their day in, day out for thousands of days now. People joke about crystal, but unless you've been around chronic users, you don't understand how truly scary it makes people become. Like a whole new level of animalistic, impulsive, and not right in the head people. I frickin' hate that stuff. Snow. I'm a big, scary dude, so I never had trouble with people picking on me or whatever. In that sense, the streets were safe to me, but seeing snow for the first time that year just made me cry and panic. It was too early for snow. I wasn't ready for that kind of cold, and I was hoping to be on my feet again before the winter came. Beautiful thing like snow just messed me up in so many ways. I hope things are looking better for you now. Thank you. Yeah, I turned it around. This was 7 years ago. I was making art from trash and selling it in markets and posting it on the streets. I became pretty known for it. I've traveled the world for exhibitions and worked with very famous artists. I'm still struggling with money. I work non-stop, and now in 2020 with the virus, I'm struggling even more. But I rent a house with a big garden for my dog and own a car. I'm far away from that life, and I don't think I'll ever be in that position again. Lots of knifings and unspeakable act instances. I was stalked by a gang one night on my way home from work. I still have no idea how I didn't end up a statistic myself. Once I woke up suddenly to a not homeless man holding a huge knife staring at me inside the abandoned building's basement I was sleeping in. Once he noticed I was awake, he asked if I was Russian. I said no, and he said he was looking for a different girl then, gave me $20 and left. I'm not sure what the word is in English, but this guy could have been a member of the Russian mafia or flesh market. He was probably looking for a runaway working girl. Waking up to a shotty being pointed directly at my head. I wasn't truly homeless, but I had no money or bank card and was trying to get back to my parents following a near-fatal attack by my ex. The actual fight happened whilst we were out, so I had no spare clothes. I'd left my wallet at his place and only had a dying phone on me. I tried getting money for a train, but only really managed enough for a bus fare to the next town, and decided to try hitchhiking. Late into the night, I gave up and managed to sneak into a barn where I was able to get comfortable enough to sleep. Turns out I didn't close the door enough, and the farmer found me in the morning after taking his weapon to investigate. He woke me up, I think he coughed loudly, with the barrel pointed at me, and I nearly number two'd myself. He asked me what I thought I was doing in his barn and quizzed me on how I got in. He asked to see my arms before he lowered the weapon, and he started chatting. He was quite nice though, and after talking to him for a while, he took me back to his house and fed me and let me have a shower. So I lived in my car, but I remember seeing this woman and talking to her outside a store when I was just chilling, eating some food, and she told me she had been homeless literally her entire life and had never slept on a proper bed in her life. I asked how old she was, and she told me she was 53. It was scary to me because I realized that that could have easily been me. I think about that woman every single day. Weird question, but would you be able to sleep on any sort of mattress after 53 years on the ground? I'm thinking of the whole Castaway situation where he finally gets home. In any case, that woman has definitely seen some stuff if that really was her life. Really grim that we can let that sort of thing happen to people in our society. I'd been homeless for a couple of weeks now and had made friends with this one couple. They seemed pretty chill but had a bit of a drinking problem. Anyway, one night I was sleeping and I could hear some commotion going on. Couldn't make out who it was or what was going on, until my buddy comes and sits on my sleeping bag, blood pumping out of his neck, like full on every time his heart beat it would splurt out. Not under huge pressure, but it was pretty bad. I asked him what had happened and he said he thinks his missus had cut his throat with a Stanley blade. He was so drunk he wasn't aware of how bad his injury was and insisted I didn't call an ambulance. So I called the police and they called the ambulance. I see the guy a couple of days later. He's still homeless, scar on his neck. He's ever so grateful. The nurse told him how lucky he was. That cut was literally a couple of millimeters away from his end that night. I'm no longer homeless. This all happened about 6 years ago. I no longer speak to him. That's another long story. She was arrested but not charged. Last year she self-deleted, so she's no longer with us. The biggest thing for me at 5'3", 115 pounds was how often people try to abduct you. That and how often people try to serve you tampered food. The teenagers trying to get clout by attacking or pranking you is another one. Oh, and that time where I came back to my tent and there was blood everywhere was super fun too. When I was 17, I worked at a little pizzeria. Some nights we have our leftover pizzas that we're meant to sell by the slice. This particular night I had a full Supreme and I decided to just bring it home instead of throwing it away. It was raining that night. While driving home, I see a homeless person under an overpass and decide to give him this whole pizza. I pull back around to explain to him that I work in the place and I wanted to give him this whole thing. He refused to accept it and said that I'd probably baked cockroaches into it or something. I was pretty upset by this and it kind of ruined my desire to give for years, but you talking about people giving you tampered food made me feel like this guy had every reason to be suspicious of me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I'm a woman in my early 20s. Not my brightest decision, but I slept in my car for several weeks when I was completely out of money. Every night I parked in a small cul-de-sac. As far as I knew, the area was office only, so I didn't take anyone's parking lot and in the morning I just left. I worked a lot, so usually I slept like a log. One night, though, I woke up feeling anxious for some reason. I looked up and saw a softly illuminated window right above me. Nice, warm light as if from a grandma bedside lamp. I freaked out a bit and fumbled for my keys. I better sit the rest of the night out at McDonald's or something. Then I noticed a silhouette not far away. A man was standing still and watching me. He didn't knock on my window glass, didn't try to talk or anything. He was just watching. I booked it out of that cul-de-sac real quick. You know, the thing that freaks me out most is not even the fact that he could have attacked or robbed me, but the realization that he might have watched me every other night, but I was just too tired to notice that earlier. Imagine if this guy had recently found himself homeless. He still has his office job, fortunately, and he's able to sneak back in after closing and set himself up a place to crash while he gets back on his feet. Things are going fine until one night a car starts parking in the empty cul-de-sac. He's freaked out. He keeps the lights off and hopes they'll go away. They keep coming back, night after night. Finally fed up, he turns on his light. No reaction from the car. He creeps outside, he's moving slowly, trying to see into the car, when suddenly someone inside of the car moves. He freezes, terrified. Seconds feel like minutes. Then the car suddenly starts and rips out of the parking lot. He remains frozen for a few seconds before running fast as he can back into the office, triple-checking every lock. The car never returns. It's one of the creepiest, unexplainable moments in his life. I don't know if it counts, but I lived in a van for a month or so when I was in college, and would sleep at the park. I didn't necessarily see it, but I heard it, and it's burned into my brain forever. A group of the local hobos beat a guy near to death, and they all ganged up on his girlfriend or wife. Then, after they had their way with her, did her in too. I found a new park after that. Let's see, my funny-ish story? A guy at the shelter I stayed at got knifed in the ribs by another guy. The guy who shanked him just walked outside and attempted to go to sleep, while the guy who was knifed is sitting on a bench, literally spurting red out of his side and lights a cigarette. When the staff called 911 and tried to help him, he was pushing them off, saying he was fine. And then there's the really horrible one. There was a gas station down the street. A guy paid for gas, took the hose, and doused himself in gasoline. I was smoking outside, and I remember him walking by outside the yard area with a lighter in his hand, arm fully extended out. He was very, very mentally ill, so I didn't think anything of it. I couldn't smell gas or anything like that. I continued to smoke, light another one up. About 10 minutes later, I'm inside, bullcrapping at the front desk, and a guy runs in the front door and shouts, "Give me a wet towel! A guy set himself on fire across the street!" Homeless shelters aren't in good areas, so I just casually walked out thinking that some idiot at the apartment across the street had set a rug on fire, and that the guy who ran in was just being an idiot. I walked out the front door, and sure enough, on one of the stairwells, there's flames. My thought process was basically, yep, some dumb idiots let a rug— oh, frick. The rug sat up. Me and 3 other guys ended up being the ones to put him out. The flames just wouldn't die though. I don't know if the gas had to burn off first, but probably. I don't really remember putting him out, I just remember after. I don't remember a smell or anything. The morbid thing I do remember is he was out and he just kept shouting, my nuts are on fire, put out my nuts." He died 3 days later. I was told it wasn't the first time he had done something like this. The shelter ended up sending me to therapy, and the woman was the best therapist I'd ever had. It still gets weird sometimes, and I can't really watch people on fire in movies anymore. It happened in around 2011 in Kentucky, so it's a while back now. I've been slowly putting my life together since then. The last time I was homeless was in 2014. I'm still struggling financially, especially now, but I'm studying computer programming in my spare time, so I can hopefully get where I want to be in life. I don't know if you viewers wanted me to list whether these individuals moved on after their horrifying events and got better or not, but it sure makes me feel better to include it and know that they're out of the woods to an extent. A woman giving birth at a bus terminal. Not as grim as some of you others, but still harrowing. I was homeless for a summer, and an acquaintance through the party scene of the town invited me to crash on her couch. Woke up in the middle of the night to her screaming into her phone about how they are out to get her and are setting the world up for destruction. Pretended like I was still asleep and got out of there the next day real quick. Everyone's going to try to steal from you, so watch your crap. Keep your mouth shut and find a good place that's isolated from nocturnal animals and other predatory homeless. Oh god, I was homeless in Seattle for many years. I've seen some horrible things ranging from bum fights that ended up with one of them dead, to people next to the downtown Macy's just stepping over this guy who'd taken too many substances and ended up dead, and that they thought was just someone sleeping. But the worst thing was probably seeing this whacked-out dealer guy who, at the time, had a bad reputation already on the hill, throw a homeless young woman over an overpass bridge onto the freeway. She didn't survive. There are plenty of other crazy memories here, and I just want to continue to remind everyone that these things happen in every large homeless population. Help the homeless, don't judge or bash them. There's a lot of amazing things you can do for these people in your city, including organizing homeless feeds, giving out essentials bags filled with dry socks or underwear, hand sanitizer, toothbrush or toothpaste, feminine hygiene products, a granola bar and trail mix or high-calorie food, protein shakes, bottled water, face and body wipes, all those things. If you can, donate some sleeping bags or jackets to shelters or even a homeless person themselves. And don't film yourself for clout. Filming yourself giving homeless people things that they so desperately need is just cringe to me. Do it out of the kindness of your heart, not for likes and upvotes. Kids beating up a homeless man. They started with spitting at him. He got up and ran after them. Then a couple of them hit him from behind with some IKEA-looking wood. You know, the things that snap easy. He got mad and they ran off. He went back to the bench and fell asleep again. 10 minutes later, they're back and they just start whacking the ever-loving crap out of him. I had to jump in and stop them. Not what I saw, what I heard, if that counts. For a while, I slept in an empty warehouse. I'm in the UK, so it was a huge Victorian building with about 6 floors. I slept on the 3rd or 4th floor, out of the way of casual intruders, like the drunks and ladies of the night that used that space. Anyway, one night I heard a lot of shouting and a female screaming from the ground floor. Now, I was young, a junkie and about 120 pounds, so I wasn't in any position to do much, but I crept down the steps to see what was happening. By the time I got there, the place was empty and the noise had stopped, so I went back upstairs. I found out the next day they found a body in the wasteland outside. Turns out the woman was a working girl. They assumed her client knifed her after a struggle, and she had made a run for it before he caught her and finished the job. Always wonder if I'd be able to help, but I'd probably have gotten knifed too. I was working in a mountain town and couldn't afford rent, even with 2 jobs. One night I was wasted after work. Me and a work friend were always there by ourselves closing, so the bar was free game. Left work at 2 a.m., walked the hour and a half back to my tent outside of town. While being stalked by a mountain lion, I assume I looked injured and could be an easy meal. That was terrifying. I had a digital camera with me, so I just kept pointing it in the area of the ridge where I could hear it walking and flashed repeatedly. I made it home safe in the end. Another night after closing, different campsite, I must have smelled like a huge gyro after working a double at Pitter's in Paradise. Got into my sleeping bag in my tent. I was just about to doze off when I heard the big crunches of a black bear sniffing me out. I was frozen with terror. The bear put his head against the nylon inches above my head, hot steam on my face. I'd pulled the sleeping bag up to my cheeks, petrified, and then I just slapped the bear's nose above my forehead. It was an involuntary reaction and I felt stupid, but I did spook the bear and it took off. I got an apartment with some friends soon afterwards. In my years of being a homeless junkie and then cleaning up and working at a business shelter on the street, I saw a guy try to end his girlfriend with a machete, like full-on swing and barely miss, and my heart was frickin' pounding, like I was sure I was about to witness a murder. I also saw countless instances of people taking deadly amounts of substances, saw a lady get the crap beaten out of her while asking for help, saw a guy get knifed, saw a big huge dude have a heart attack and just die, and the paramedics frantically trying to give him chest compressions and crap and he was just flopping around. Saw a lot of stuff honestly, but those were the ones that come to mind as scaring the hell out of me the most. I have a million stories from those years, and half sound fake because they're so ridiculous. Basically, if a random substance dealer asks you for a ride home, don't say yes. If you do say yes, have extra keys with you. I was almost subject to the unspeakable act after driving a random dealer who I bought stuff from home. The guy stole my keys out of the ignition and said he needed to be serviced if I wanted my keys back. Pretended to start crying to make things awkward, and he got out of my car with the keys. Locked my doors, got my spare keys, and floored it out of there. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.